On? Oh, yeah.
There we go.
Okay, let's start. The opening statement. This is a regular meeting of the Princeton Zoning Board of Adjustment being held electronically via Zoom on October 28, 2020 at 7:30 p.m. pursuant to Section 13 of the Open Public Meetings Act. Adequate notice of the time and place of this meeting has been given by prominently posting the sunshine notice of the Princeton Zoning Board of Adjustment. Such notice has been placed on the official bulletin board at the municipal complex and by transmitting a copy of the notice to the Princeton Packet, Town Topics, The Times, Trentonian, and by filing a copy with the Clerk of Princeton on October 16, 2020, and has been posted to the municipal website, www.princetonnj.gov/meetings. Pursuant to Executive Order 107, due to the state of emergency in New Jersey regarding COVID-19 coronavirus, notice that during the declared state of emergency, all regular and special meetings of the Princeton Zoning Board of Adjustment will be held electronically via Zoom, was transmitted to the Princeton Packet, Town Topics, The Times, and was filed with the Clerk of Princeton on May 6, 2020. Such notices have been placed on the official bulletin board at the Princeton Municipal Complex and on the Princeton website and are to be maintained throughout the year. And by transmitting a copy of same to the Princeton Packet, Town Topics, The Times, Trentonian, Comcast Media, and by filing a copy thereof with the Clerk of Princeton, notices have been placed on all window doors of the municipal complex. Claudia, can you call the roll?
Mr. Cohen,
Yes.
Olson,
Here.
Mr. Davidge, Mr. Floyd,
Here.
Shriver,
Here.
Mr. Tenenbaum, Mr. Valvanis, Ms. Chen,
Here.
Mr. Stein.
Claudia,
Yes,
I think George Stein is in the attendees.
Oh, he's over here now with us.
I just moved them.
Good. Sorry, thank you.
Okay. So I guess we'll go through our first order of business is approval of the minutes from the 24th of June. They were in everybody's packet. Are there any comments or corrections, or do we have a motion?
I move to accept the minutes.
Second, anyone?
I'll second it.
Okay, Claudia?
Mr. Cohen,
Yes.
Olson,
Yes.
Mr. Floyd,
Yes.
Shriver,
Yes.
Chen.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. Our first case, well, excuse me, yes. Our first case is file number Z 2020-819, 29 Green Street, block 17.02, lot 23 in the R4 zone, Witherspoon Jackson Historic District. Are the applicants in the audience?
Looking for Ryan.
Was on there.
Ryan there?
We want to move him over, right?
Yeah, just
Find him.
chat.
No, I see him.
Okay, go ahead and move him over.
There he is.
Many thanks. Did not mean to be hiding. We should also have our architect, Max Hayden. We should have the homeowner as well tonight. there's, I see Max. And then our planner and engineer, Jim Kamalik, is on as well.
Who's the homeowner? Do we have?
Should be Sam Boré, should be on as well.
Okay.
Do you have everyone?
We do. Thank you so much.
Derek, do you want to
Sure.
frame the meeting or the hearing?
Mr. Bridger, I'll swear you in for the evening. Do you swear or affirm your testimony this evening will be truthful?
Yes, ma'am, I do.
And I'll just indicate that the board did take jurisdiction of the application last month, and the noticing, of course, was in order at that time.
Well, good evening. Thank you. Sam Boré is the owner applicant. He's the owner of 29 Green Street. He's seeking a D4 variance for floor area ratio and C1 and C2 variances to permit the construction of a new home. In exception to the required lot area width, rear yard setback, side yard setback, and impervious coverage. Additional variances are requested to permit a main entrance to the house not oriented to the street, driveway setback, distance between buildings and windows of other buildings, and to permit 2 driveways. He's in a historic, the Witherspoon Jackson Historic District, and they have reviewed the application, and I will go over some of their conditions at the end of this memo. Property is located in the R4 zone, subject to the use and bulk regulations in accordance with 17A, 254, and 257. The existing 2-family use was permitted by variance. The subject property is non-compliant regarding the required 6,000 square foot lot area. The existing 5,397 square feet, and it's non-compliant with regard to the 60-foot lot width. The existing is 45. It's non-complying with respect to the smaller side yard requirement, which is 8. The existing is 4.5 feet. It's not complying with regard to the 20-foot combined side yard setback. The existing is 13.7 feet. And it's non-compliant with the floor area ratio. The limit's 40% and the existing is 52.5%. And finally, it's non-compliant with the impervious coverage. The required is 61.5%, the existing 65.5%. The property was granted a subdivision approval in 1977, creating the subject lot and the adjoining lot at 25 Green Street. In case number 395-1, approval was granted by the zoning board to permit a 2-family at 29 Green Street. The applicant is proposing to demolish the existing 2-family dwelling and construct a single-family home with an attached garage and 2 driveways. The home will feature a living room, dining room, kitchen, 3.5 baths, and 3 bedrooms. In terms of the D4 floor area variance, the applicant is proposing a floor area ratio of 51%. The existing floor area ratio is 52.5. The maximum permitted, which is the proportional FAR due to the undersized lot, is 44%. While technically a D variance, the applicant shall demonstrate that the site can accommodate the problems associated with the increased floor area and not that the site is particularly suited for more intensive development. No relief for variance may be granted under the terms of this section unless such variance or other relief can be granted without substantial detriment to the public good and will not substantially impair the intent and purposes of the zone plan and the zoning ordinance. The applicant should discuss the negative and positive criteria and any special reasons. I will go over the bulk variances. A bulk variance is required for the 6,000 square foot required lot area. The existing is 5,397. A minimum lot width variance is required. 60 feet is the minimum and 45 feet is the existing and proposed. A rear yard setback for the attached garage. The requirement is 35 feet and the existing is 14.7 feet. Side yard setback for the garage is requested. The requirement is 5 and they are requesting a 3-foot setback. And an impervious coverage variance is requested. The maximum 49.5 and they are proposing 60.3%. And there are some additional variances that arise out of the house orientation and driveway setback requirements from the Neighborhood Character Ordinance, Section 17A 403A2 requires that a house and the main entrance be oriented towards the street. The main entrance is on the side of the house. Section 17A 403I1A requires that every lot shall have a maximum of one driveway opening, providing access to a street, providing access to a street. So 2 driveways are proposed. That requires a variance. And then section 17A 403I2B requires a driveway setback of 3 feet from the side lot lines for lots less than 50 feet in width. The proposed setback for the east driveway is 1 foot, and the setback for the west driveway is 0. A variance is required. And then in accordance with section 17A 383, distances between building and windows in rooms of other buildings. The setback between the subject property and the existing house on the left, based on this ordinance, requires a 14.75 foot setback, and a 12.5 foot setback is proposed. Staff does not recommend the approval of the 2 driveways, although a similar condition exists on site. The site being completely redeveloped with a new house, and this runs counter to the recently enacted Neighborhood Character Ordinance. And staff would recommend that stormwater management be required for the additional impervious coverage over the allowable 49.5%. They've requested consideration both under the C1 and C2. I do note that Elizabeth Kim is here tonight. I don't know if she wants to go over the suggested conditions from the Historic Preservation Commission.
Ms. Kim, we'll just swear you in if you would like to testify. Do you swear affirm your testimony this evening will be truthful?
I do.
Thank you.
So the Historic Preservation Commission conducted a hearing on this application on October 17, 2020. And the HPC
Elizabeth,
chair
there's a
issued
real echo. There's a real echo in your audio.
Oh, do you think, let me see if I can turn down my volume. Maybe that's it. Is this a little better?
I think sit back a little bit.
Sit back.
When you moved back a little bit, it was
Is
clearer.
that better?
Go ahead, talk.
Is this better?
Yes,
Okay. That's good?
I think it's better. Yes.
I'm going to keep talking. Okay, let me know. I can try to move it back further or turn down the volume.
No, I think it's okay.
So as mentioned, this application was, the application was heard on October 17th, 2020 by the Historic Preservation Commission, at which time the HBC chair issued a memo dated September 4th, which I believe was included in your package. So I'm just going to try to summarize that meeting and the memo from the chair. So the property contains an unusually large building, considering its lot size in this neighborhood. The size of the house is really attributed to its evolution into a 3-block construction. The original oldest part of the house that faces Green Street was built circa 1870, and that was the first block. The middle block is believed to have been a house that originally stood between this property and the property to the right, which was 25 Green Street. And this house was moved to the back of the existing house and added to that to be the second block. And the third block is the rear section, which was a later addition. The current house's front door is off the east side elevation, which is also highly unusual for this neighborhood. Most likely this was an alteration that occurred, and the front door most likely was facing the street. The applicant is proposing to demolish the existing house and construct a new house in almost the same footprint as currently exists. The new house will have a similar 3-block design, and a new front porch is proposed with internal access only, and the front entrance will continue on the east or the side elevation of the house. HBC concluded that demolition is warranted because of its poor condition, which was presented by the applicant's architect. So HBC voted unanimously to recommend approval of this application to your board with recommendations. So as part of this, they had recommended, as part of the support of this demolition, they felt that exploratory work should be required before and during disassembling the building to permit documentation of the structure, which is not an unusual process for historic properties that are demolished. Steps from the street facade should be added to the new front porch, since accessibility will provide continuity to the historic district streetscape. The air conditioning units and the generator should provide some type of screening and enclosure with landscape to reduce noise and provide some type of visual buffer. And the landscape plan should be augmented to properties to its east and immediate rear, and that the final landscape plan should be reviewed and approved by an appointed Historic Preservation Commission subcommittee. There were other details which the commission reviewed, which had to do with like the color of the hand railing and the horizontal board. And also, I believe the applicant agreed that they were willing to provide the tire lanes instead of just paving the whole property, the driveway with macadam. The commission also did support the engineer and zoner's report where they felt that only one driveway was required. They felt that this new driveway, which is about 170 feet long, should be able to accommodate any additional parking and provide that off-site. They felt that the additional driveway on the side was a little excessive and not required. So those are the comments from the HPC, and if there's any questions, I can answer. I'm available.
I don't have any questions. Anybody, any board members have any questions of Ms. Kim? Okay. Mr. Kennedy?
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, members of the board, Mr. Bridger, Elizabeth Kim, thank you everyone tonight for being here. I'm Ryan Kennedy. I'm an attorney at Stevens & Lee here for the Boré family. As you heard from Derek and Elizabeth, this has been a long haul. Tonight we'll have 2.5 to 3 witnesses perhaps. We've got the applicants here. We have our architect, Max Hayden, and we have our planner and engineer, Jim Kamalik from Kenso Resources. As Derek and Elizabeth said, this is a proposal for a home that the applicant has worked on with HPC for quite some time. And we're really pleased with the collaboration and feedback that came out of that process, and a lot of positive things really came out of that. We're here to propose for the Boré family a home that's smaller than what's there now, that's greener, that has less coverage, and we think very importantly is more street friendly and appropriate for the neighborhood. And that comes and manifests itself, through the front porch, and with the HPC help, you'll see how that actually interacts with the front of the street, which was a new addition and something that we agreed with HPC to add. While maybe technically under the ordinance that's not the front door, it sure looks like it and will be accessible, certainly, as many other houses on the street are, and we think that was a good addition. It also has that rear garage that the neighborhood character is looking to bring, because this is a walking neighborhood. This is a pedestrian-friendly neighborhood. And we're pleased to make those changes and to introduce a home that we believe and that HPC we think agreed is appropriate for the neighborhood. Now, I said it's smaller, and you'll hear from our planner not just that it's smaller than what's there now, but from our floor area study, you'll see that it's actually small. If you look at the average and the mean, it's from a floor area perspective, it's on the lower side of average for the neighborhood. So you'll hear testimony on that. We'll also heard Ms. Kim talk about the driveway, both from a material perspective and from a number of spaces. That's probably the one bit of disagreement that maybe we'll have and we'll be talking about tonight. Not on the material, of course. We are in agreement with the engineering estimate, and we think we have a plan that we can talk through based on their recommendations to get, technically not the coverage not down to 49.5%, but to have the mitigation. We'll be reducing physically quite a bit of coverage from what's there now, even more so than we had initially planned, you'll hear about. And then using a porous material for the driveway will get us, we believe, well, technically counting as coverage under Princeton's ordinance, will get us down in that range that we think it will be a major improvement from what's there now. Now, as to the existing driveway, now, it's been referred to it a couple different ways in the memo. Currently, this site has 2 driveways. We're not proposing a new one. We're just looking to keep the driveways in place. And you'll hear, based on this neighborhood, there is parking only on one side of the street. And, we were hoping to be heard last month, and everyone had a very late night that night, and we hope to be done earlier than you were last month tonight. But we heard a lot about parking in the neighborhood, and you'll hear about some of that tonight. And because there's only one side of the street parking, this keeping and saving an off-street spot here could have some benefits. And as you'll hear from our engineer, the removal of some impervious coverage and the delta in impervious coverage that comes from the ability to save this additional off-street space will come at the cost of about 100 square feet of coverage. And that's not new coverage, but that's existing coverage that wouldn't be removed under our revised plan. So we think both from the ability to save a precious off-street spot for visitors or for maneuverability to keep people from having to back down a long driveway has some benefits. We'll also hear about the cadence of the neighborhood. The neighborhood character ordinance really, I think, did a lot of good thinking about the house driveway kind of cadence that a neighborhood should have. And this street doesn't have that, or never has quite had that. And right now, it is driveway, house, driveway, house, and removal of that second driveway would actually cause there to be a large pedestrian gap, and one that, if you look at the cadence of the street, might even be a little detrimental to remove from a pedestrian walking expectation. So I know there's a lot there in a summary. We've got 3 sets of witnesses. Maybe we can have them all sworn in at once, if that is okay. And maybe I'll ask the Bores and Jim and Max to unmute themselves. And Ms. Casey, if you could swear them in, if that's all right.
All right, if you would all raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm your testimony this evening will be truthful?
I do.
Thank you. I'm also going to ask that we've got one exhibit as we normally do, which is a kind of pre-done, pre-marked PowerPoint presentation that we'd like to have marked as our exhibit for the evening, if that is all right.
That's fine. That's the one that you had already posted, or that was posted on the.
That is correct. There
Okay.
are a few small game time changes, including the date on the front of it that we've corrected. And when we get to one of those, we'll note it for the record if we fix something earlier today.
Okay, done.
So with that, I'm going to attempt to share my screen and hopefully be successful here.
Eureka.
All right. So with that, I'm just going to very quickly ask the Bores to introduce themselves. I know they're Sam in particular as an owner. This is a place they're looking to make their home. He's someone who went to school in the area growing up and is this is not a developer or someone looking to sell this. This is something they're looking to make their home. And if I could just have them just very quickly introduce themselves to the board.
Thank you very much, Ryan. I'm Sam Borai. This is my wife, Susan.
Hello.
And we really appreciate the opportunity to present in front of you today. It's been a while. It's taken us a while to get to this point, but we appreciate all the work that's gone into it from our team and also from the engineers and the people on the town helping us, come to this point. It's taken a while, but we're really excited to hopefully move into the house and become a part of the neighborhood.
Thank you. With that, I'd like to introduce our architect, Max Hayden. I see you've already unmuted yourself and you're sworn in, but if you could very quickly, I know you've testified before this board many times. I'd like to introduce him as an expert in architecture this evening. Chairman Cohen, if you'd like to hear his credentials, I'm happy to have him go through them.
I think Max has testified before this board before. We're comfortable with him.
Thank you. So Max, with that, we can start going through our exhibit here tonight. Switching slides and hopefully successfully, that works on everyone's screen. If you want to take us a little bit through where we are, what the neighborhood is, and where we are in Princeton.
Thank you, Ryan, and thank you to the zoning board for hearing the application. You saw the rendering on the last slide of our proposal, and to your left is an aerial map of the site on Green Street. I think we all know the history of the neighborhood and Jackson Street that used to be below us. The house, it's a long vertical lot. There used to be a house in between, which became, as Elizabeth Kim said, the middle of 29 Green Street. It was moved from in between the Wendy Rivers house and Mr. Tadlock's house. Mr. Tadlock moved it and attached it to the house. It's an old historic neighborhood. And if we could have the next slide, Ryan. You see the map on the left is a Sanborn map from, I believe, 1905, possibly earlier. The subject property is the third building in from John Street, and the middle section of the house is the building next to 29 Green Street, 25 Green Street. And you'll see the photograph on the right is a contemporary photograph taken in last winter, I believe. Next slide, please. That's the subject property. Mr. Tadlock was a long-term resident. He renovated the house greatly. The middle section is from next door and was physically moved over. The framing in the basement of the front of the house is within the last 40 years. It's blonde lumber. There is no lumber that we can tell of in the basement at all. That the flooring framing is all modern. When Mr. Tadlock renovated it, he changed the direction of the gable. The gable used to face the side yard, but then he made the gable face the front yard and really altered the view of the house. We believe that the house was 3 windows wide, 2 stories tall, with a gable parallel to the street, like many other houses on Green Street. Next slide, please. There's a view looking from Witherspoon towards the Dorothea House. 20 Green Street is on the left, which we recently completed, and the subject property is a little bit further up on the right. Dr. Rivers' house is on the right. Yana Moore is in the Brown house. Wendy Rivers and her husband Eddie is next to Dr. and Mrs. Rivers. Next slide.
While we're on this, though, just note I see a lot of front porches on this street.
Yeah,
though it's absent on our existing house, and I also noticed that there's no parking on our side of the street. Is that?
You're right. And if I also point out that Yana Moore's house, the Brown house on the right, at one point did have a front porch similar to Wendy Rivers' house. It was renovated in the 60s by Yana's mom and dad, and they took the porch off. The 20 Green Street at one point was actually enclosed with glass, as several of the other porches were, and the house directly across the street from 29 Green Street still has an enclosed glass front porch from the 30s. Again, that's 20 Green Street, which we received a variance and put a substantial addition on to the rear. Next slide, please. You see the scale of the houses. They're rather, 20 Green Street is probably one of the tallest houses. Our house will be similar to the house on the far right of the screen with the brown trim. That's really kind of what we modeled 29 Green Street on. We are utilizing the original stone foundation at the front of the house. So we really are very much within the footprint of the house that exists there. And we are slightly smaller, as Ryan mentioned earlier.
So Max, just real quick, that's something I don't want to lose sight of. So really the only thing that was salvageable, unfortunately, from this home was that stone foundation. So that in some ways dictated where this home would be sited if you were to use that?
Right, that's correct. When we met initially with Elizabeth Kim and Derek Bridger, they suggested that we might want to keep some vestige of the house. And if any of you know me, I am the chair of the Hopewell Township Historic Commission, and my office is in an old building. My house is an old building. If there was something of value to keep, I certainly would have tried to keep something. And this building was viewed by the Historic Commission when they did their review for the Witherspoon Jackson neighborhood as non-contributing, because there is no existing historic fabric to the house other than the foundation. Next slide, please. That's a view down the street. And again, the Rivers house, the Yana Moore. To the right of Yana Moore's house is again another late federal 3-bay, 2-story simple house that we really modeled what we wanted 29 Green Street to look like. Next slide, please. Wanted to juxtapose our proposed building house with the Rivers house next door. The Rivers house, Wendy Rivers and her husband Eddie, their house was renovated a few years ago, and the roof line is one roof line. The windows are not orderly. They're kind of random and probably purposeful for what the rooms are. But we wanted to do something a little bit more orderly, and we wanted to break up the massing because it is, a little bit longer. The house will appear a little smaller at the front because the roof line parallel to the street will be lower, and the middle of the house is actually lower than it presently exists. So Mr. Tadlock did put the entry on the side. It really works very well for the floor plan, but one can walk up through the front porch. The HPC suggested that, and we embraced that, and you can enter the house through the front door. There are 3 pairs of French doors, slender French doors, so there is easy access to the front of the house as well. And we really, again, you see the 3 windows, 2 stories tall, the gable that's parallel to the street. We tried to not recreate something because we have no photographs of what existed, but we tried to respect the proportion and the details with the standing seam metal roof, the lap clapboard siding, the 2/2 double hung windows, the shutters that are proportional to the windows, the trim that is typical of the houses in the neighborhood. And we really tried to respect what's there. Next slide, please. And to the right is the existing house, and to the left is the proposed. So you can see how we changed the massing, and I believe the house looks smaller because of that. We also gave it a much more orderly fenestration window pattern, and the windows are slightly bigger, which really is in keeping with the style of the house. And it's a little bit friendlier looking. The house on the right is a little worn and a little austere. It has a simple awning over the front door. There's also a basement entry on the back of the existing house that we'll be eliminating. And there you see the driveways. Our driveway will be our driveways if we're allowed to keep both. One is to the left. It originally belonged to the house to the left. And when the property was subdivided, somehow it, was put onto 29 Green Street. There is a lot of driveway in between 29 and Wendy and Eddie's house. The Wendy and Eddie's actually have a 2-car wide driveway. Ours will be a 1-car wide driveway. And we are locating a garage to the very rear of the property, which is really typical of what once existed here. And we recently did the same thing at 20 Green Street.
Here's that rendering again. I'll just point out that, a few of the items that were in the HPC, memo that we worked out with them kind of are all reflected here, I believe. The steps that we talked about with them, the different porch railing material and the striping here. I think those are the, some of the key items that kind of came out of that final meeting. I don't know if there's anything else you want to point out, Max, about that process.
No, I think that summarizes it well.
Get a little into the house itself. You want to take us on a kind of a very quick walking tour?
So the bottom plan is the first floor plan. There's a living room, a dining room, kitchen, a very small mud area and powder room, a stair that goes back all up to the second floor and down to a hopefully someday finished basement. We do have a small breezeway connection to the garage, and the upstairs has a total of 3 bedrooms with 3 bathrooms and a laundry room. We're trying to reuse a few of the beams from the middle section of the house, the existing house, in the living room. That's what the dotted lines are. They're expressing possibly using some of the timber from the middle of the old Tadlock house, if we can. And we're just trying to have a very clean floor plan with a lot of windows and light coming in.
So Max, other than having, I guess, the space to really have this entrance, is there many houses of this style in this neighborhood would probably have you enter through the front and just walk through the living room? Is that, you know, a common way that this would happen?
It's either through the living room or through, as in 20 Green Street, we actually had a very narrow entry hall with a 27-inch wide staircase and another 27 inches to pass by. At that house, we ended up keeping the stair because it had character and had really some historic significance to the interior of the house, but we created a large opening between the stair hall and the living room. Here, because the stair exists as where we drew it, and there is nothing of historic. Everything is from the 1980s on the interior of the house, and hollow core doors, narrow oak planking, vinyl replacement windows. There's really nothing of any charm or significance to the house. Again, you see the outside, the standing seam metal roof, which we're proposing to be black. Shutters would be black. The window sashes would be black. All the other trim work would be white, and the siding, the hardy plank siding, would be a nice blue color. There's the lattice with a little breezeway connection, and then the 1-car garage. The car has a man door, so you can walk from the garage through the breezeway. You will have to go outside a little tiny bit to get to the back door.
So we talked about it as an attached garage, but you really do have to go outside to get back into the house.
Yeah, it's not
covered
right.
walkway.
It's attached to a very small breezeway, right?
For floor area purposes, that counts, and for connected garage purposes, for setbacks, for example, that counts, but it is, you know, not necessarily interior space.
Right, right. This facade, we actually eliminated some windows in the left-hand wing towards the rear. That's where some of the air conditioning condensers will be behind a fence, and that also faces the neighbor's yard, so they'll have a little bit more privacy. It worked out better for our kitchen layout, and it will help them with a little bit of privacy. That's the front elevation. I believe we show shutters in the rendering. We don't have them on this elevation, but there will be shutters on the second floor. And the French doors with transom windows, and the front porch with steps leading to the side. And you see the garage peeking in the back. There's the back view. The house is very slender. It's really only 1 room wide, and metal roof and 2 chimneys. One will be functional, one will be a faux chimney.
I don't mean to race through this next part, but, you know, just very quickly take the board through, you know, if anything you want to point out about any of the appropriate
Again, an example of standing seam metal roof, and I apologize that this light fixture is actually not what was approved by the historic. We had a more sympathetic
I'll go to the next slide.
Yeah, this is paving and the brick. We're going to match the existing fence that's there on the neighbor's property, and the windows will be simulated divided lights, so they'll look like an actual old-fashioned window. They will be maintenance-free. The shutters will look like functional shutters. The downspouts will be a traditional half-round shape. And the siding will be hardy plank, which mimics very closely clapboard siding. The lattice will be very simple for the breezeway, and the doors are very simple That's the main front door, something simple and elegant. And again, the siding color, the trim color is white and the windows are black. Trim will be wider to mimic what used to be throughout the neighborhood. And this is showing the mahogany rail, but all the railing will be painted white and will be traditionally styled and scaled appropriately to the building.
And that the white railing is something that we changed at the recommendation of
HPC, right.
All right, Max, thank you. Before we move on to our next speaker, Mr. Chairman, I'll ask if you'd like us to continue or keep Max up here available if anyone has any questions. Is that at your discretion?
Do any of the board members have any questions of Max? Okay. The only question I had was just and I think you explained it, you're not going to have any covering from the edge of the breezeway to that back door.
Correct.
Yeah, no problem. Okay, I'm good. Move on.
Thank you. I'm now going to bring up our engineer and planner to take us through the variances, to take us through the planning testimony, and to take us through our stormwater thoughts. So with that, I'll bring up Jim Kamalik, who I believe was previously sworn.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Thank you for hearing the application tonight. I've been previously before this board and qualified as both an engineer and a planner. I'm licensed by the state of New Jersey.
You've been before us before. We're comfortable.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
I appreciate it.
So Jim, you wear, you're wearing, your hair is short, so it doesn't seem matted down, but you're wearing two hats tonight. We'll first get some engineering testimony and then some planning testimony from you this evening. And first, if you could take us through, what we're calling the site plan, just the layout of what we're doing here, and then we can start going through the variances, many of which are existing, of course, but we can get through that testimony.
Sure. So in terms of the site, as previously mentioned, Ryan can highlight the proposed dwelling, which is in the central portion of the property in basically the same location as the existing dwelling, and basically the exact same size as the existing dwelling. So, number one, in terms of its overall footprint, it's comparable in the overall design scheme with the slight modifications and orientations of the roof line, the gable, the architectural treatments. It's in keeping with the existing building that is there today with those improvements. And from a floor area perspective, the proposed floor area is actually slightly less than what exists today, even though it is over the standard in the ordinance of 44%, where 52.5% exists and 51.1% is proposed. In terms of access to the property, currently on the right side of the dwelling, there exists an existing driveway up along the right side of the dwelling, and we're proposing to basically sharpen that up, rehabilitate it, still utilize it for the new design, with the addition of a garage at the rear, which was advocated by the neighborhood character ordinance, so as to have one fully enclosed parking space inside the garage, sort of out of view. And then secondly, in front of the garage, we have room in that area that's being highlighted for a second parking stall. And that area is located approximately 80 feet back from the front right-of-way line. It's a little less than previously stated, I think, by HPC, just based upon the scale notation on the plans. It's actually half of that distance, but the driveway would extend from the front right-of-way to the rear at an approximate width of slightly over 8 feet, which is really driven by the constraints and the narrowness, the peculiar nature of this particular lot. the property lines and the location of the building. So it does comply with the ordinance requirements for driveway width. But, you know, from a parking standpoint, the parking requirement for the residents would be addressed by the garage, and then the second parking spot immediately in front of it. Now, on the left-hand side of the property, you'll see that hatched area near the right-of-way, and that's an existing driveway that currently exists today, and the applicant is proposing to keep that, obviously refurbish it, but maintain it as part of the plan to provide an additional parking area off of the street. As Ryan mentioned previously, there's only parking on one side of the street, so eliminating this really doesn't provide for an additional parking lot on the street due to that parking restriction. And you know, we feel that really the functionality of parking along the long run on the right side due to the actual width of the driveway access, that this is well suited and will provide a supplemental parking stall that would really function and help parking on the property. Additionally, along this left side of the property, there are two air conditioning units further back along the dwelling, as well as a pad for a generator and an emergency generator, and the patio that would be at the rear. So in terms of the layout, this is what the applicant is seeking. In terms of improvements to the property, the grading and drainage conditions will be improved, where currently some of the drainage in the existing condition drains towards property lines. The plan includes a grading plan to convey the water from the rear of the lot along both side yards and drain towards the street, where drainage facilities are available to convey that water within the street, away from the property and away from neighboring residences. So there will be improvements as part of this plan for grading improvements to improve drainage for the neighbors. And that will overall make the site better. As previously mentioned as well, in terms of impervious coverage to the site, within the table, the fifth line up from the bottom, you can see that 49.5% is the ordinance standard, where 65% exists, and the impervious coverage is actually being reduced as part of our plan to just slightly over 60%. You know, relief is being sought because the 49.5% is not being met. But again, recall that this lot is slightly substandard, which is a general theme within this neighborhood of substandard lots, which tend to drive things like FAR and impervious coverage percentages to the higher side. So, you know, that's a condition that the property owner is dealing with and contending with. But again, we're still reducing the impervious coverage on the lot.
Jim, do you want to go to do you want to jump right to our alternative driveway plan? I know that the engineering memo and HPC kind of asked us to look at strips and mitigation, and just want to see what we could do to improve on that. Is that?
Sure. Yeah, there were some concerns relative to that. So we took a look at it between the HPC meeting and this meeting, and we came up with a scheme that would still provide for basically a pervious driveway solution along the right side of the property, extending back to the garage. And then for the smaller driveway to the left that would be maintained, we can convert that mostly to grass with just some paver parking strips in that area, which amounts, as Ryan previously said, to only about 100 square feet, or 102 as indicated on this plan. So the benefit of that is that lower left-hand area would be significantly greened up from an aesthetic standpoint. And then from an impervious coverage standpoint, we can administratively reduce those numbers and functionally reduce those numbers even further And we just included some photographs of possible pervious type driveway solutions that we could include as part of this.
Now,
Due
Jim, just so I have it correct, if we were to go with the HPC's, kind of recommendation of the strips and implement that here on the shorter driveway, that would actually remove both, deal with stormwater and remove coverage, but the grass paver system still counts as coverage, but would essentially improve the stormwater management of that site, even though technically it still would count as coverage. Do I have that right?
Yeah, functionally, we view this as a pervious surface, but just the way the ordinance is written, it is interpreted as an impervious surface administratively based on the ordinance, but the function and the intent of the ordinance would be fulfilled with a pervious driveway solution. So we just put together a little table illustrating how these numbers shake out. And on the left-hand side, you can see the plan that was submitted in terms of the existing at 65.5% and the proposed plan at 60.3 in the lower left-hand corner with the submitted proposal. And then based on this alternative scheme that we just reviewed and took a look at, if we go with the pervious driveway along the right side, plus the driveway paver strips along the lower left-hand corner of the property for the small driveway, we would be at administratively 56.8% of impervious coverage, which would still be over the minimum requirement. However, if one were to just view the pervious driveway and apply 100% reduction to that, we would be well below, in the middle there, the 49.5 standard at 42.6, as it would function as a pervious surface. And just to give you, for the sake of context, consideration of that driveway, the long driveway on the right, if we applied a 54% reduction in the impervious coverage calculation, the 49.5 would be met. So about half, like a 50% imperviousness of that driveway would actually meet the standard within the ordinance. So we think that this is a good solution to address some of the concerns that were raised in the engineering review memo relative to the impervious coverage and the presence of an additional driveway. It's sort of two birds with one stone in our view. And actually, we feel that the intent of the ordinance would be satisfied, even though administratively it sort of drives us to ask for this relief in terms of a variance.
So just so I have it, no matter what, we pull up the entire driveway on the right side and replace it with this pervious coverage, we still need the variance. But the way you view it, we would be treating that. So if you look at it as either stormwater mitigation or removal of surface, we'll need the variance still, even though at best we would actually be reducing a good 10% of coverage from the current 65 down to 56% of ordinance coverage. But in actuality, we would be treating a good 764 current, previously proposed square feet as grass pavers. Is that fair?
Yes.
All right, so I'm going to, if we can go back to our rest of our bulk variances to make sure we've captured them all. We've talked about coverage. We've talked about a little bit about the second driveway. Want to make sure we get to all of them. I know many of them were pre-existing issues with the lot, but just want to go through our list to make sure we capture them all for the board.
Sure, we had lot area, lot width, rear yard setback for the garage at 14.7 feet. Also the side yard setback for the garage. If you can highlight that, Ryan, in the right rear corner, 5 feet is required based on the ordinance. That's the requirement. But as you can see, based upon the narrowness of the lot and the location of the driveway close to the property line, it's pretty difficult geometrically to have a 5-foot setback there. And based upon those conditions, we're still providing a 3-foot separation, which is enough for, grading and drainage and things like that. It's not right on the property line, but there's some practical difficulties to providing the full 5-foot setback in that location. So that's the reason for it, the way that it basically connects to the driveway and the linear access from the driveway. As it was
On that subject, though, what is along this property line, both on the other side of it and, along it? Is there mitigation there? So is there a fence along this property line?
currently, I believe that there is a fence.
And on the other side of that, it matches up with another property's driveway as opposed to a house or.
Yes, there's actually a fence to the right next to the 0 and the 3.0, which traverses off the property line to the right. So in actuality, there's a lot more space there that goes onto the neighbor's property, but based upon where the property line is, that dimension is 3 feet. So there's a lot more space visually when you're out in the field and you're looking at that area than just the 3 feet, but we need to call our distances to the property line.
And might that be a good place for another garage, perhaps on the neighboring property, if they were ever to want to do that? Is that a common?
Yeah, I
thing
think
to see
that would,
imprinted?
that would make sense. And there would be, limited impacts to this property as well as the neighboring property. So if that were to be contemplated in the future, I still think that that would be a good fit in terms of the similar uses there.
Thank you.
As was mentioned, variance relief for the entrance, not facing the street, since there is an entrance on the side, in addition to the entrance at the up the steps and from the front porch, as Max had talked about. Relief for more than one driveway. Again, the second driveway is existing. We'd like to do what we can to maintain that based upon those constraints, the width of the run to the rear of the property, along with just doing basically 2 paver strips there and grading it up. And that would still keep the cadence of the driveways on the street and that overall concept of interspacing the dwellings by driveways and keep that sort of rhythmic pattern going, which is, suits the conditions that are out there now. In terms of the driveway setback along the right property line, similar to what we talked about with the garage, what we've done is we pulled the edge of that driveway off of the property line slightly so that it's entirely on the applicant's property, and then provided about a 1-foot little buffer distance there where we will include, as part of the landscaping plan, a landscape buffer separating the 2 driveways and greeting that area up along the property line. So technically, based on the ordinance requirement, I believe the requirement is 3 feet of a driveway setback to a property line. And based on these constraints, we have provided 1 feet, which is below that standard, but, based on, driven by the constraints on the lot and improving the existing condition where the existing driveway goes up to the property line. So I think that, additionally, there was some input as to the walkway from the main door to the right-of-way, which the neighborhood character ordinance calls for, a 3-foot wide walkway that's separated by a 1-foot distance from the driveway. I think HPC took a look at this and said, is that really necessary? Can't the driveway be used to access that side entrance? It seems somewhat redundant to have to force a walkway in that location. We can't say that we disagree with that. Plus, as a result of their comments, the stairway and landing has been added to the front porch in the right front corner of the building. So it would make sense to possibly remove that pea gravel walkway in between the building and the driveway. And, if the board tend to agree that that's something that they'd like removed, we can certainly, just have the access along the driveway to that entrance.
Having that walkway there, does it, now that we've added an entrance to the front porch from the street, essentially, that walkway kind of almost make it, take away from the way that the front porch may appear to be while technically the side entrance may be the front one under the ordinance, it certainly will look a lot like that with that walkway there. But whereas by removing it, perhaps the front door or the front porch will and front steps will look a lot more like the entrance that people are looking for on the street.
Yeah, that's possible.
I believe we've got one other one. I know Derek mentioned earlier the
buildings.
yes, if you could.
Yeah. So that is the 17A 258, where Max calculated based upon location of building wall and adjacent windows where 14.75 feet are required. This particular property, based on the off-property dwellings plus the building that's basically being constructed in the same spot as it was before, we're providing 12.5 feet. So it's about a 2-foot reduction in that standard, or a deviation, which we don't see as really substantial, but from a housekeeping administrative standpoint, based on that calculation, relief would be required.
Thank you. I think that's the bulk issues. I can move to would you like me to move to the neighborhood slide and start talking about floor area?
Sure. So this slide here was reflected in the 20 Green Street application, where there was a survey done of the properties highlighted in yellow within the R4 district along the Green Street corridor, for a perspective of what the FAR is in the area. And just for the sake of reference or relevance, again, the FAR standard for this project is 44%. The existing FAR is 52.5%. The Green Street project was 65.4%. So that was significantly higher in FAR than our project here.
So Jim, that's the yellow star, and that's the project that you were involved with, and Max as well, and across the street essentially about 1.5 years ago.
Yes. It's about 130 feet away from this project, which is the red star. The red star is 29 Green Street. So as I mentioned before, the conclusion of this analysis was that there's a significant preponderance within this neighborhood of slightly smaller lot areas than the ordinance, the way that was drafted after the fact, reflects in terms of its FAR calculation. And what we're requesting here at 51%, the slight reduction, is well in keeping with the theme for the neighborhood. So just to give you a summary, the dwellings were looked at within this particular neighborhood in terms of their footprints, number of stories, garages, and porches. And it was found that the average FAR of the yellow outlined parcels with the current 29 Green and 20 Green Street FAR was 57.6%. 57.6 was the average, and the median value was 58.2%. And here we're asking for 51.1%, well below what that average is. Additionally, the highest FAR was 1.13, and the lowest FAR was 0.02. 226, lot 51 on Quarry Street. So values were approached and were well over 70%. There were 77 lots that were over 70% within the neighborhood. And then there was one more lot that was just under 70%. So on the whole, of the 29 lots that were reviewed, 18 of those, or 62% within the neighborhood, were substandard relative to lot area, which really drives what these calculations are for FAR and for impervious coverage. So, overall, we feel the number of dwellings in the neighborhood well exceed the proposed floor area ratio, and that what's being proposed is not inconsistent with what's actually on the ground in the neighborhood. And from that reason, we don't feel that there would be a significant impact or a substantial impact to the neighboring properties or to the surrounding neighborhood, notwithstanding the fact that there already is an impact to the neighborhood that's been existing for decades and decades, because the building that's there is larger in FAR than what's being proposed. So there's no exacerbation of any impact here. It's actually a slight reduction. Additionally, when you look at this exhibit, you can also see how many of the buildings throughout the yellow highlighted areas do extend deeper into the lot. They're not just structures right at the frontage, but the building mass, it does extend deeper into the property, similar to this property at 29 Green Street. So in terms of the overall rationale for the FAR variance based on the Coventry Westwood standard, this particular lot needs to be able to handle and accommodate the challenges that may be associated with increased floor area. We think that it's clear, and there's no doubt that the lot can still handle that, because it does so in the existing condition and FAR is being reduced. Additionally, we feel that the positive criteria for this D4 variance does support several purposes of zoning, including purpose A, to encourage municipal action to guide an appropriate use and development of lands in the state, helping the general welfare to promote public health, safety, morals, and general welfare as well. And the reconstruction will bring the property from its current condition, very, dilapidated structure and aesthetic impacts to the neighborhood, up to today's building code and standards. Additionally, purpose I, to promote a desirable visual environment through creative development techniques and good civic design arrangement. We feel that this will be very well supported with the slight modifications of the architectural design that Max testified to, in terms of the details of the historically compatible building treatments, as you saw in the color rendering of the slideshow. Additionally, the front porch that would be added provides an important building element that is common throughout the streetscape of the neighborhood, but was lacking in the existing condition. And then also rotating back that front gable along the front of the structure, which helps reduce its overall building mass and make the building appear lower. I think Max testified that that particular change makes the house actually look smaller from the street than it does today. It brings that mass back, and then breaking up that facade with the visibility of the roof helps provide for making the building look smaller. And we also added that rear garage for an additional parking spot at the rear, as advocated by the municipal ordinance. So this, additionally, the site is not being expanded, it's being reduced. The impervious coverage is being reduced, and we don't see any substantial negative impact to those conditions today and the proposed conditions as well. And as I mentioned, in terms of the review of the FAR in the local neighborhood, with this proposed FAR being well below the average and the mean, we think that that's clear evidence that this property can still maintain that FAR without any substantial detriment to the zone plan or to the public good.
Thank you, Jim. You know, one thing we maybe just didn't get out today is the overall size of this, you know, project. So while we're reducing it, we were talking about percentages, and you know, the intent and purpose of the zoning ordinance is to, you know, control this. But you know, I don't know. I think it was word. But once you take the size of this property compared to others, which you've been doing by percentage, at the end of the day, this is a 3-bedroom house. Is that correct, Jim? And you know, approximate square footage before and after the reduction. You know, we're still below a 3,000 square foot home, and based on your testimony, I'm hearing that that's, you know, the lower to meaty part of the average of floor area for this neighborhood.
Yeah, that's correct. The dwelling floor area is 2,759 square feet, which is less than the existing 2,833 square feet, which, you know, we would characterize for modern standard of living, you know, as a reasonable amount of floor area. It's certainly not a McMansion on a very small lot. And, you know, it's our opinion that that's appropriate here.
Sure.
I would like to mention that in addition to the overall improvements of the lot from this project, the grading improvements that'll be provided, we have improvements to other conditions of bulk requirements that are currently non-conforming, and they are the single side yard, the combined side yard, a lessening of the impervious coverage condition, and a lessening of the FAR deviation. So we feel that those bulk parameters are also being made in more conformance with the zoning ordinance than currently exists today, which would provide an additional improvement.
Thanks, Jim. Just one last question for you, and before we wrap up, one of the conditions of the HPC was to go back and have a landscaping plan reviewed by the HPC's subcommittee, something we agreed to with them and would agree as a condition to this approval to do. But I believe that's your handiwork as well. So, you know, I don't know if you want to speak to it just very quickly about, you know, what that subcommittee will be hearing or seeing once that's reviewed. But I imagine it's well beyond adequate and appropriate for the neighborhood. Is that fair?
Yes, we'll work with the subcommittee to review the landscaping plan. I think just a couple of takeaways here are on the top of the plan around the AC unit and the generator pad. It was requested to provide some screening around that, so that'll be provided. Additionally, at the rear of the property, we've included some plantings around the patio, some additional shade trees, and then some conifer evergreen trees in the right rear corner of the property that was requested at the HPC meeting from one of the neighboring properties in order to provide a little visual buffer to the garage. So those elements will be resubmitted if this is approved as a condition of approval to the HPC subcommittee. We'll work with them to make sure that they're satisfied.
Excellent. Thank you. Didn't want to just not mention landscaping at all, since we'll be doing it there. So with that, that's our direct testimony. I guess open up things for our engineer and planner from the board or from your professionals. Just reserving to respond to anything that you or the public have, of course.
Do any of the board members have any questions of the engineer planner? Okay, well, I have one, or a couple. The The driveway on the left, I am a little concerned about the 0 lot line there. It's an 11-foot wide drive. Do you think you might narrow it down a little bit just to maybe create some low planting just as a buffer? I mean, not necessarily anything high, but just something to symbolically separate it from the adjacent property.
I
Whether
think,
well, let me add to this, whether that driveway goes with the alternate plan of the 2 paving strips and the planting, or the other way. I would just like to see the whole thing a little narrower. And I don't have a problem with the second driveway because I understand the issues related to one driveway and moving cars all around. But I would like to see it, I'd like to see a little buffer between that and the adjacent property.
I think we can accomplish that, even if
Well-
it's similar to the right-hand side, what we're gonna do with some plant material along the property line.
Yeah.
It is a little tight there, Steve, but I think if we shift it over a little bit and create some planting on the left-hand side of that paver strip, we should be able to make that work.
Well, your main driveway is narrower than this one, right?
Correct.
So I'm sure you could narrow it down to that width. And my other,
The only thing, Steve, is that this would be serving as a parking space. So we would need to provide a minimum of 9 feet in width in order for it to be compliant. So I think we can get a smaller strip in there in terms of a foot in order to achieve what you want, but we can't go to 8 feet.
no, I didn't suggest 8 feet, and 9 feet is fine. I just want some separation between that and the adjacent property.
Okay.
And then my other comment is the pavers, the grass pavers, I'll call them, and the other driveway. I mean, I think it looks nice, but I always get very concerned about it because I think when kids run on them and people, if somebody has heels on their shoes, they become a little tricky. And so I can appreciate the use from a drainage standpoint, but I think from a safety standpoint, I get a little concerned about those.
Okay.
And the last thing, the screening from the air conditioning units and the generator was the HPC, and if Elizabeth is still there, maybe were you looking for a fence type screen or a planting type screen?
HPC was looking possibly for a combination of both. One was to reduce some of the noise to the residents next door and also to provide some visual screen.
Okay. I mean, so maybe some additional planting there. How big is that fence surrounding that equipment? How tall?
I think we had it to about 4 feet so that it clears the units
Okay.
on that order. And we do have a drainage swale coming through there to convey the water away from the neighbors to the street. So we need to accommodate sort of the fence and the swale. And then if we can put a little plant material in there, we'll see what we can do to achieve that.
Okay, and one last, I guess drainage is the other thing. When the water runs down, you're running it towards the street. On either of these driveways, is it going to run on top of the driveway to the street
Yes,
when it hits those?
yes.
Okay.
And just so you know, Steve, there is a fence on the neighboring property line on that left side by the AC units.
Okay.
Right now, I think it's a 6-foot fence there, so that may solve some of what we're talking about in terms of screening.
Yeah,
based on
I
what's
believe
there.
it would.
Yeah.
I believe it would.
But we'll make sure that we work with HPC on that as well. That's one of their biggest concerns, and we'll have a chance to finalize that with them as well.
Okay, that was all I had. And like I said, are there any other board members that want to add anything or any questions of the
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify. So you're saying that you're not connected to the storm sewer for any of the site stormwater?
Correct. Yeah, there isn't, there are no inlets in the immediate area just based on the location here on the street.
Okay. And going back to what Steve was saying about the pervious pavers, you have a concrete apron. Even if you were to use the pervious pavers, it's not crossing the sidewalk, correct?
It would stop at the back of the sidewalk so that the sidewalk
Right.
would provide pedestrian access across the whole
Yeah.
front with a smooth
Okay.
sidewalk.
Got it.
Yep.
Okay.
I have a couple of questions about that second driveway. Derek, I'm wondering, in the staff notes, it says staff does not recommend approval of 2 driveways. Is that, does that, I just want some clarification. Is that still the recommendation or the lack of recommendation given the new information about how it might be you know, pervious pavers being used or the strips?
I mean, I think it's just that the ordinance, we just passed an ordinance that said 1 driveway per lot, and we're trying to respect the town's and planning wishes about the new ordinance. It's a tight neighborhood. A lot of neighborhoods, a lot of houses only have 1 garage in the neighborhood. I mean, I think the paving strips are an improvement, but there's still a lot of impervious coverage on the site, so.
Well, that is my feeling too. And I heard 2 words that I found interesting. One was cadence, the cadence of driveways, and that pedestrians would be expecting that. And I would say that I never feel deprived if there isn't a driveway as I'm walking down the sidewalk. So that made it sound pretty, but it's not persuasive to me. And the other thing is that my understanding, the other word was administrative, applied to the fact that, well, you know, it isn't counted, or it would still be counted as impervious, but they are really impervious pavers. And my understanding is that they're not so permeable, actually, or pervious. So I'm not sure to use the word administrative kind of implies that it doesn't really matter. And I do think it matters. Because it's just, you know, it's another space that could be, you know, could have actual lawn rather than a car and strips or whatever is going to be there. So I'm not, I guess the other thought I have about it is there's a long driveway, there's a garage, and people often talk about this neighborhood as, you know, people want to live here because it's walkable and that people are going to be using less cars. So I almost feel as though it's kind of like, maybe you can't have it both ways. Maybe you can't live in the walkable neighborhood, but also have the expectation that you can hop in your car and drive away. You know, maybe that's one of the things that you give up when you live in that kind of a neighborhood, because otherwise it creates some, you know, congestion and other issues for other people.
If I could speak to that point for 1 minute. Having the client at 20 Green Street and having Sam as a client at 29 Green Street helped us immeasurably during the reconstruction of 20 Green Street. Having that available off-street parking was a godsend, because otherwise we had to park on Paul Robeson Place or Witherspoon Street, and, you know, plumbers, electricians, everybody dropping things off, trying to work, having that extra parking. And, you know, after this house is hopefully reconstructed, you know, somebody has a party and says, hey, Sam, can I borrow that space for Saturday night? It's that type of thing that could actually help lessen the burden of parking on the street for the neighbors.
Well, I mean, there are, I don't know how many cars could park in that driveway. More
Right.
than two, I'd say.
It's about maybe 2 or 3, but, you know,
Maybe they'd be walking to the party. I mean, that's a walkable neighborhood. That's what I'm
no, but
told.
people coming from out of town, you know, someday we will hopefully again be able to have parties post-COVID.
I mean, I
So-
can just tell you, just practically speaking, between my wife and I, you know, we work different times. We would be in the driveway maybe at the same time. So more often than not, if there is just a single driveway, it would probably end up being one of us parking there and then me looking for a spot on the street with the other neighbors. So, I mean, the way we looked at it was it's another off-street parking space. I did listen in on the application last month, and it seemed like a lot of the neighbors were concerned on that application with parking. So, you know, we kind of felt that we were headed in the right direction by trying to keep the space. And, you know, it's existing, it's there. I understand the not wanting to allow a second on a new project, I get it, but for a street that maybe doesn't have a lot of street parking and where there is a crunch on parking, you know, it is an existing alternative space.
Not only that, the driveway right next to us, they're wide enough to have 2 cars side by side, where we'd have to park behind one another, which is not ideal because we work at different times. And in that neighborhood, there's no place to park. So one of us would have to park on the street, but there's no parking available, so.
And just to speak to the impervious coverage, and I know that Jim walked the site, I believe, with the engineering department, underneath what I would actually call grass, because I have similar grass in my own backyard, but it's really crabgrass in the back of 29 Green Street. Underneath the grass is slate pavers. Almost the entire backyard has slate pavers underneath the green weeds. So we will be improving immeasurably the amount of pervious coverage just by pulling all of that stuff up.
But it's still higher than
You're right.
it's
You're
supposed
right.
to be.
It is, but truly this lot is 100% paved if you were to kill all the weeds.
I think we're making a reduction of over 12% with what's being proposed in terms of the impervious coverage, you know, below what's there today.
And Jim, that doesn't account for, that's the physical actual ordinance coverage that's being removed. That doesn't factor in the pavers, correct?
Right, yeah, that's no adjustment. That's just assuming that the pervious pavement surface would be considered impervious. And that was with the alternative scheme that you're looking at here on the screen. So again, we're starting out with this big number of impervious, and in our view, we are significantly reducing it, as well as providing the grading, you know, improvements to the site. So it's definitely going to function much better than it does today.
That's all I have.
Okay, anyone else? Any other comments?
One more question about the second driveway. I don't see how deep it goes. I can see the width. Is that, can the depth be reduced? Yeah.
It's right now back from the right-of-way line, it's about 28 feet.
So you could bring that down to 18 or so, right? If
Yeah,
we're
I
trying
would
to.
say, you know, maybe we bring it down to adjust it to 20, but let's leave 20 there if we need to make an adjustment to that.
Well, you'd want to keep it, wouldn't you want to keep it behind the house? You don't want a car sticking out beyond the front wall of the house alongside the porch, if you're going to do that.
Right, so in that case,
That's about
right
20.
now we're about 23 feet to the front facade. So we could maybe take 3 feet off of the back of it and still provide 20 feet from the back of the driveway to the front facade of the building. We could reduce that, say 3 feet.
Good suggestion.
Okay. Bernice, is that it? All right.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. If there are no other comments from the board, I'd like to open it up to the public for comments. Do we have anyone who's out there who wants to talk? Claudia, Eve, is there anybody out in the audience?
I don't think so. Claudia, do you see,
So 3 people so far.
or you moved them already?
Yes.
All right.
Okay, I guess not.
No,
We have 3 people.
Okay, do they want to speak?
They're coming on.
Okay, good, good.
Hello. Oops, hi.
Ms. Rivers, we need to swear you in. If you would
Okay.
raise your right hand, do you swear or affirm your testimony this evening will be truthful?
I do.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Dr. Wendy Rivers, and I live at 25 Green Street, which is the property directly adjacent to 29 Green Street. I am a 4th generation Princetonian. On the other side of me, my parents, Dr. and Mrs. Rivers, are living in the house that's been in my family since the 1930s. I welcome new people into the neighborhood, but I do have some concerns about the project at 29 Green Street. One thing I wanted to mention was that the whole kind of plan for this property is being based on a foundation. And the Historic Preservation Commission, based on my understanding, never said that there was any historic significance of the foundation. The applicant is asking for 10 variances on a new house. And, you know, it's a bit disturbing to me, especially going over these plans with my 2 brothers, one of whom is a residential architect, graduated from Princeton University. The other brother of mine is a planner for the city of New Orleans, who couldn't be on tonight because he's an essential worker in the hurricane. But, you know, the Witherspoon Jackson neighborhood was made a historic district, and the zoning ordinances were put in place to maintain the community. So you're starting with a blank slate here. And I find it troublesome that, you know, that you're freely allowing all these variances when maybe the discussion should be changing the zoning, changing the ordinances, as opposed to just, you know, saying that, you know, the neighborhood's houses can be bigger. The other thing that I noticed in this presentation is that there seems to be a bit of smoke and mirrors, especially regarding the impervious coverage. On the engineering civic report, it is saying that the driveway, the 2 existing driveways are making up 545 feet of impervious coverage. And I have walked on this property, and there is gravel and grass where the driveways are, and there are some loose pieces of slate where weeds are growing through. The impervious coverage is a big issue to me because I already have flooding in my basement. You know, there is flooding rampant in the Witherspoon Jackson neighborhood. I understand that they are planning to attend to storm drainage issues in the Witherspoon Jackson neighborhood. But I really want the zoning board to carefully look over the coverage remembering that because of the zoning, they do not have to cover, they don't have to include the new enlarged patio. They don't have to include the porches and the stoops. They don't have to include the garages. So I just want to put that out there because yes, more of the property is going to be covered, period. With that, there's also a bit of smoke and mirrors about the size of the house in that this is a 2.5-story house. It is going to be taller than the existing house. And if you look at the side view of the proposals, it is going to be covering up more of the view on the side with the breezeway and the garage. You know, a comment was made that, you know, it's okay to put a driveway and it's okay to put a garage in the back of the yard because I could build a driveway in the back of my yard. And, you know, what if I want to build an accessory dwelling unit in the back of my yard? I don't want that accessory dwelling unit looking at a big, long garage. The other point I want to make is that the Historic Preservation Commission was talking about landscaping on the east property line, which is my property line. There's going to be a 1-foot space there. I really don't know what type of plant you could put in a 1-foot space. And plus, we do park our car right next to the property line. We would not be able to open our car doors if there were plantings there. So I just would like the zoning board to think a little bit about, do we really need 10 variances for a brand new house? If the foundation was moved, again, saying, you know, the foundation, there's no reason the foundation has to stay where it is, then a lot of these variances would not be needed. And the size of the lot is actually pretty typical for the houses on Green Street. Garages are not typical of houses on Green Street. But thank you. I actually welcome the berets to the neighborhood, but I really want the zoning board to think about this because I think we're entering a slippery slope here for the new projects that are coming down the pike. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else like to speak from the audience?
Yes, I have my, yes. I raised my hand. I don't know what to do. Yes, unmute me.
We can hear you.
We can hear you.
Oh, can you hear me?
Yeah,
Yes.
we just can't see you.
Oh, sorry. Hello. Start my video. Yay.
Okay.
Okay, sorry about that.
Ms. Ozinski, we need to swear you in. If you
Okay.
raise your right hand. Do you swear affirm your testimony this evening will be truthful?
Yes.
And that's, okay, so that's Andrea Ozinska and you, sir?
I'm Peter Inat,
Okay.
31 Green Street.
Hi, how are you? Hello.
Hello.
Okay, we too, we own 31 Green Street to the left of the Borres' new home, and we also welcome them to the neighborhood, but we have a lot of concerns as well, just like Dr. Rivers. And for myself, one of the things, I mean, what I heard all evening was, it seems to me to be about in defense of the second driveway, of the short driveway that is between our home and the Borres' home. And I have to say that we are a house with no driveway, and we have a sticker to park on the street overnight, and we also rent municipal parking in the neighborhood. And we get a lot of water in our basement because of that driveway, because of the sloping backyard. We are concerned about impervious or pervious, well, the impervious coverage. And now that you'll have even, less ability for the water to, go away from our basement. And if you put a big patio in the back with, I guess they're a bluestone or pavers or what they're planning. So it seems to me that if, it makes no sense to me that if you can build a new home from scratch, that you would recreate a sliver house with a sideways orientation in a newly minted historic area, where you have a budget where you could do something wonderful and fabulous, with a proper, front entrance that's a real front entrance, move the house over, not have a double driveway to one side. It just aesthetically, it seems non-contributing to me, and it makes no sense to me. And I'm also concerned about how close that driveway, why you need parking spots, extra parking spots for guests. We're concerned about that. We're concerned about noise. I mean, a 4-foot fence around 2 AC units. Most homes, modern homes have, or new homes have, 1 AC unit with multiple zones. So you need a second driveway, you need 2 AC units.
3.
Well, 2 plus a generator. At one point, I think it was 3 plus a generator. We're very, very worried about noise. I don't think a 4-foot fence is going to do it. All night, it seems to be in defense of a second additional driveway. And the whole plan for the house is all about protecting that driveway. And again, our hats off to Mr. Hayden. I think that 20 Green Street is absolutely gorgeous. It's really beautiful, but it matches the neighborhood. I think if you have that type of resource where you're raising a home, can put up, hello, and can put up, can you still hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
I don't know what's going on there. Anyway, you can build something from scratch that's in keeping with a historically contributing home. I really don't understand what's happening here. So these are, some of our concerns. It's almost like you're recreating a sliver home with a sideways orientation, and all in defense of a second driveway. So that's some of our concerns. And another concern is, I really would ask the engineers that will be in charge of landscaping to put up, I think Yaina had suggested to me that we request arbor vitae or something very tall, like privacy evergreens down the line, all the way down the line of my fence, because I think this house will be taller than as Dr. Rivers mentioned, and a lot of light bleed and new windows coming at us and noise coming at us. And so these are some of my concerns and Peter's concerns. I also am very, very concerned about, and I would ask in the end for zoning to please present us with a plan about where this dumpster is going to be and what will be the plan for parking, because we only can park off street. We have no parking. We park on the street. It was pretty tough. I mean, as beautiful as 20 Green Street is, when these teams come in, they come in, I took pictures, they come in with 7 or 8 vans, sometimes from one vendor, and it's tough, when you have children, and I have children with asthma. So, and Mr. Bore was helping those teams. So these gentlemen would get out of their vans and like walk all over my walkway and walk all over my little pebbles and dump their, gear there and drop their toolboxes there. So these are my many concerns. Thank you for hearing me out. Peter, did you want to?
No, I basically Andrea and I spoke beforehand, so she reviewed some of the notes that I also had. I was also going to just say that I do welcome Sam Bore and his family to the neighborhood, and really happy that they're redeveloping 29 Green Street. I think that I do find it very interesting, that there is all this concern about this left driveway, because it's an artifact of a non-conforming architecture originally. So there is an opportunity here now to recreate a beautiful conforming house from scratch. So, you know, that was very interesting to me, and I don't really know exactly, don't really follow the logic that was presented at the meeting today regarding the left driveway. Otherwise, Andrea covered many of the same thoughts that I had. Thank you.
Thank you.
I believe we have one other person.
Yes, this is Tony Marquetta.
Yeah.
Mr. Marquetta, we need to swear you in. Do you swear affirm your testimony this evening will be truthful?
I do.
Thank you.
My name is Anthony Marquetta. I've been a resident of Princeton for 31 years. I am a licensed professional planner for over 40 years, and I've been on the Board of Trustees of Dorothea's House for over 25 years. And I'm here not as either a planner or a representative of Dorothea's House, but as someone who's familiar with the neighborhood because I have been attending classes at Dorothea's House, many of the events that they have, typically on weekends. My children have attended Italian classes there. 5 of my children have gone to Community Park School. We were members of Community Park Pool. So I am familiar with the area and the neighborhood. And Dorothea's House, which is right there at 120 John Street, I think one of the exhibits showed Dorothea's House being literally 4 narrow properties from the door, primary entrance of Dorothea's House. And if you were to look a little further, and it didn't show it, there's a driveway that is the exit to the parking lot of Dorothea's House, which I used, and in fact used this afternoon. That enters onto what is John Street, and then I think it changes to Chambers Street. And all the streets in that neighborhood are very narrow. And with the addition of on-street parking, and especially in winter, when you have foul weather and snow accumulation, makes driving in the neighborhood quite challenging. You are required to go slow anyway because of the narrowness of the streets, but with the addition of off-street parking, which is in high demand. And how I know that is that we frequently have people utilizing the Dorothea's House parking instead of on-street parking, even though they may not have an issue or be attending Dorothea's House. I think that the proposed project, and I listened in at the Jackson Witherspoon Historic District session that predated these meetings, but I view the addition of a new building that is consistent with what was in place before, but much more attractive and more energy efficient. And if I believe the planner and the engineers, is smaller and has less impact on the coverage ratio, I think that this proposed project will actually be an enhancement to the neighborhood. And I do not see any reason why it shouldn't be approved by this zoning board. I also think the whole issue of the additional driveway actually minimizes the demand for on-street parking. If you were to eliminate that, then you probably have another car competing for on-street parking. And we know that that's in short supply. Weekends with Dorothea House functions taking place, classes, and events on Sunday, the first Sunday of each month, as well as the Baptist Church having its functions on Sunday, make the parking very challenging in that neighborhood. So I don't see a real problem with maintaining that second parking spot. So those are my comments.
Thank you. Okay, is there anyone else in the audience who would like to speak? Okay. Claudia, there's no one out there. Eve, no one out there?
No, I don't see anybody else.
Okay. All right, so we'll close the public portion. And Mr. Ryan, Mr. Kennedy, do you have?
I go by anything. Hey, you works as well. So very briefly, I think there was a bit of confusion. So if we could have our engineer come back just so we can go over the figures of the physical reduction in coverage that we're talking about, the drainage improvements then, and then the additional reduction, not so much technically in coverage. I know there was a bit of, maybe confusion about that, or, we're trying our best to explain it, but the difference between the actual coverage that we're physically removing, where that is, what the numbers will be afterwards, and then on top of that, the conversion, I guess, of the driveway to this porous material, and what that does to the project, just so we're absolutely clear. So Jim, if you could, real quick, we're currently on the site, there's 65.5% of coverage. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And once we've removed the coverage that we're talking about, again, not including the porous driveway that's proposed, we will get down to 56.8%. Is that correct?
Yes.
So we're removing just about 10% of physical coverage from the site?
Yes, that's correct.
And then on top of that, we're doing a 764 square feet of pervious material. Is that correct?
Yes, for the driveway.
All right. And then on top of that, there were a couple, I heard you testify about some other site improvements for drainage. So there's going to be work done to rectify the current situation beyond just removing coverage, some swales and directing water away from neighbors as well?
Yes, there will be grading improvements that'll direct water from the applicant's property towards the street, as opposed to in the direction of neighboring structures. And that should address the neighbor's concern to the left that she just expressed concern about water coming onto my property, and my basement is damp, and I'm worried about this. We'll actually be conveying that water towards Green Street, away from her house. So that will be an improvement. Additionally, I should note that as part of the review of this project, the board professionals, Derek, as well as the engineer, Jack West, specifically visited the site and reviewed the surface conditions on the property, and basically confirmed what's on the submitted proposal in terms of what counts as impervious coverage and what doesn't count. And in actuality, originally the survey showed a driveway a little bit longer on the left side that had overgrown, and we actually reduced the coverage over in that area at the request of Jack West in terms of the proposed impervious coverage. So we're confident that not only did we review those conditions, but we actually walked the site with the town professionals, and they've looked at the plans and concurred based on that site visit.
Thanks, Jim. So just really quickly, thank you all again, and I want to thank the neighbors both here tonight and those who helped participate in the HPC meeting. A lot of this feedback is helpful to us and resulted in some real positive changes to the project, and we think that leads to a product that we can all be proud of here tonight. At the end of the day, this is a variance application. Yes, this is a narrow lot. Yes, this is a neighborhood with almost entirely, if not exactly entirely, non-conforming lots. I think one thing that we all agree on is perhaps the zoning in this neighborhood doesn't fit the neighborhood. That came up in HBC, it came up tonight. It shows up when you look at the survey of the floor area and lot widths and everything that we went through this evening. And unfortunately, then on top of that, the other thing I think everyone agrees on is that there's not enough parking in this part of town. So we have an opportunity to improve coverage considerably, I think, as we just heard, to turn maybe an eyesore into a house that HPC was proud to move forward to this board that's smaller, and that's, you know, smaller by a couple points than the average in the neighborhood when we did the study. So it's smaller, it's greener, and we hope for the applicant and for the neighborhood and that we can, you know, off-street parking spaces don't come around every so often. I know I got one approved on another street a few years ago. It is really difficult, and once they're gone, they're gone. And, you know, we actually heard, I think, a lot tonight about the reasons perhaps to keep it, both from turning movements with driveways and being able to exchange cars, which ties up the street, as well as just the scarcity of on-street spots, which this would help in the neighborhood. And if we could do that at, you know, for a little less now, if we've agreed, I think, to one of the comments to reduce the depth of it while still not having it be in the, you know, the front yard, we get a few extra feet. So what we were saying was 100 square feet of coverage for those strips. It's going to be even a little less after we're done with the, you know, addressing the board's comments here tonight. And that's almost what the comparison is. So I just want to thank all of you here, everyone who's participated, for listening and, you know, volunteering here tonight and hearing this application. Thanks.
Okay, is that it?
It is. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Well, let's go into executive session and hear from the board. Anybody want to start? Comments? Concerns?
I'll start.
Please, Michael. Yes.
I think my two concerns, you know, I do like the design, and I realize the house it doesn't need a variance for height. It's a long lot, but impervious coverage, we've talked about a bit. That's my concern. The second driveway is also my concern. I think the second driveway, which was not, to my knowledge, even used by Mr. and Mrs. Tadlock. I don't remember ever seeing a car in that driveway. So it's prior existence, I think, isn't a justification for it. I will mention also, I'm a member of the parking task force, which is, this is one of the neighborhoods we're assessing. I understand the parking restrictions and the demand on these streets, and I look forward to when this building is finished, because a third of the demand is taken up by contractors right now. Somewhere close to half of the demand with the Paul Robeson House and the finishing up of 20 Green Street. I think the short driveway is not needed. The main driveway will probably hold, not counting the garage, 3+ cars. I think this is basically, and I can understand it not wanting to shuffle cars around. But typical with this neighborhood is you don't have double driveways, you don't have double widths, and you got to move your cars. I think the 0 line setback with the neighbors to the west is a consideration and should be a consideration. And without the true need for this driveway, I think its effect for lowering impervious coverage and giving a little relief to the neighbors on that side is a valuable thing. So those are, and hopefully, and I'm sure we'll, whatever water drainage, taking the driveway away and doing your normal landscaping and drainage mitigation will benefit that neighbor also. So those are my comments.
Thank you. Anyone else?
I just say I like the design too. I think the fact that HBC approved it think the fact that they're not really building on that pad, I don't see any reason not to go along with this.
Okay. Any more comments? Well, I have a couple of things. I originally spoke to the driveway and in favor of it, but I can see with this further discussion that probably the second driveway might be a little excessive, given the fact, as Michael mentioned, that you can get 3+ cars in that driveway, plus a car in the garage. So you have plenty of parking in the proposed driveway. So the secondary driveway obviously avoids shuffling a car around, but that's pretty typical of the neighborhood. So I would be happy if that second driveway were eliminated. Although the house is bigger than requires a number of variances, it is still, in a sense, smaller than the house that was there. And as Michael said, the height is not an issue. And I think that the size, it would be nice if it was a little smaller, but I think it's reasonable. I am concerned about the air conditioning units, and I think that that's something that HPC can look at. As was mentioned, there's a 6-foot fence there now. There'll be a space, probably 4 feet, and then another fence, and then the air conditioning units. So maybe some additional planting there might help. I mean, the noise is never going to go away, but maybe it can be minimized. And the drainage, again, is a concern, because you're going to be running water down the long driveway over the sidewalk into the street. I don't know what can be done about that, but it's still, I always have a problem running across the sidewalk, because in the wintertime, it makes the sidewalk a little treacherous. And let's see what else.
Couldn't some drainage be put like at the front of the driveway, kind of a?
Well, I mean, you could put a drain there, but it's got no place to go, unfortunately. You could put a trench drain there or something to catch the water, but there are no storm sewers in the immediate area. So I don't know. The only thing theoretically you could do would be to run under the sidewalk and come through the curb itself onto the street. But I would think that the engineering department might want to take a look at that to see if we can possibly eliminate the water coming across the driveway. And those are my concerns.
I agree with both of you about the second driveway, but I guess that's not a surprise.
Yeah, I thought initially it was not an issue, but I can see the concerns of the neighbors, and I agree with that. So,
just like to point out that the neighbor to the left, Andrea and Peter, they did park in the driveway for about the last 5 or 6 years. Mr. Tadlock had allowed them to do that. So
I see.
For the record, yeah.
I see. Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I was wondering if it was possible for me to make a comment at an appropriate time.
Sure. Well, just wait a second till we finish the board comments, and then you can comment. I'm comfortable very comfortable with the design of the house, and even though it has a side entrance, the addition of steps and the porch in the front creates the visual appearance of an entry on the street. I think the house is actually very nicely done. So Well, those are the end of my comments. Anyone else on the board like to say anything?
Yeah, I would agree with the way that the sideways house was executed in a way that doesn't feel like a typical side entry. I think in the end, the narrowness of the lot does limit, how you can solve the entry problem. So it was done in a way that I think works. And as far as the second drive goes, I hear what's being said about that. I could support having 2 strips and a smaller parking area, but I do see that it is quite possible to stack up quite a few cars in the main driveway. So to gain that space for landscaping would be an improvement, I think.
Good. Derek, I have a question. If, in theory, this house could be rebuilt on the existing foundation, would that require variances if they rebuilt the house, left a portion of it, and rebuilt on the existing foundation?
As long as it complied with all the bulk requirements, the grandfather clause is no longer in effect in the borough.
Okay, thank you. So they couldn't. Okay. All right, anyone else like to comment?
You could just renovate the existing home, correct, Mr. Britcher?
Yes, sir. Yep.
Yeah.
And keep the driveways and the impervious coverage as is?
Derek, I have one question before the board votes. In your memo, you say staff recommends stormwater management be required for additional pervious coverage over the allowable zone requirement. What did staff have in mind? Is that something that can help the board now? Did you have certain stormwater management, or just that it has to go to engineering for a review?
Jack was the engineer that reviewed this. He's since retired, but I think, he was just concerned that it is a small lot. The neighbors are in close proximity, and he wanted to have an opportunity to take a look at the drainage and see if there was stuff that could be done to mitigate the effects on the neighboring properties.
And that's something the applicant is both okay with, and we feel we've done. When the memo was initially drafted, that was before we found other places to pull out impervious coverage, as well as the porous pavers. So it may be that we've addressed it, but that's why we've made those changes and are willing to continue on towards that path.
Steve, can I jump back in just for a second?
Certainly.
I'm looking at the drawings. Now, most of these houses don't have garages. Most of the people are parking their cars beside the houses and things like that. I really don't have a problem with that second driveway. I think, given the fact that parking is a real problem in that neighborhood, in that area, I think providing one more spot is a plus, not a detriment. And it doesn't take away from the neighborhood to have that driveway, because all the rest of the driveways are the same kind of parking spaces. So I just wanted to say that. I'm not going to disagree with whatever the board wants to do about it, but I do think there is a reason to have that second parking spot.
Well, the second driveway requires a curb cut, which eliminates parking on the street. It may not provide for another car, but it does create more space on the street.
There's no parking on that side of the street anyhow.
Okay, well.
I mean, like I said, I'm not.
No, I just think
that's something I want to go to the mat on, but I do think that if we have a problem with parking in that neighborhood, then providing another space.
Well, but it's a private space in a house that has the ability to park almost 5 cars.
Right.
They have a driveway that's very long with a garage. So, I mean, I think there's more than adequate parking for the house.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, and maybe I'll direct this to the board attorney, we have two different sets of variances here. We have both bulk and a D variance. It's not common in this part of New Jersey to bifurcate them, but would it be amenable, since there is some discussion about that one bulk variance, to perhaps bifurcate that off? We need 5 votes for the floor area, and I think there's been a lot of consensus on that. But perhaps that the C variance for the parking, and I didn't really count, and there may just be one there, but perhaps that could be split off separately since it only needs a simple majority for that bulk variance.
Mr. Kennedy, I don't have a problem with that, but I'm assuming you're saying that you'd like to have the board vote on your D variance, and I guess all the other bulk variances that they agree on, and
Yes.
sever off right now. We'll have a second vote on whether you've got 1 driveway or 2.
More or less, yes.
Okay. All right. I don't have a problem with that. Our board members, are you comfortable with that?
I'm comfortable with it.
Okay.
Just a question, Karen.
Yeah.
With the small driveway, doesn't that affect the percentage of impervious coverage? So what number would we be voting on?
Yep, you're right. That's a good point. So we'll have to pull off the impervious coverage variance as well. Plus the applicant did give you an alternate driveway design with the pavers. So if we pull off impervious coverage and we pull off the variance for 2 driveways, that would leave a floor area variance, lot area, lot width, rear yard setback, side yard setback. And the entrance for the house, which I think they have now added a front entrance as well, but there's a variance for that. And
then the 17A 383 distance between buildings variance.
Yep. So all of those could be addressed with one motion, and then there'll need to be a second motion with respect to whether it's 1 driveway or 2, whether you like the alternative design proposed by the applicant, and then what that impervious coverage number would be based upon 1 or 2 driveways and the driveway design.
Okay, we can do that. Any other board comments? All right, let's, Elizabeth, do you want to add something?
Yes, I just wanted to talk about the pavers. I apologize because I lost my internet at a certain point when the applicant was presenting the new paver design, but I understand they are grass pavers, which are common. I do want to note that when HPC had reviewed this application, their understanding was when the applicant had agreed to tire lanes, that it was for the long driveway, not necessarily for the short one. And the reason that the commission was interested in the tire lanes is because it was used on the application across the street on 20 Green Street. And they found it appropriate for the historic district, and it also reduced the amount of asphalt that was visible. The grass pavers, I think everyone has seen it. I feel that the applicant will really be unhappy with it. It's supposed to have a lot of grass going through, but oftentimes it is not successful. So I'm just putting that out there for the board to consider.
Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, we have, I think.
I would rather not bifurcate the application. If it's our application, I'd rather just have a vote on the entire thing. If it doesn't want to be voted on for the second driveway, that's fine.
Right. Hey, that simplifies it. Apologies for the detour.
Okay. All right. So does a board member want to make a motion on this? Anyone? No one?
I move that we accept the application. I mean, my hesitancy is because I can't name off all the various
Well, we have,
variances, but
well, I guess it's going to be, if Karen, it's floor area ratio, lot area, impervious coverage, side yard setback,
Rear yard setback,
rear
lot
yard
width,
setback, the
lot width,
lot width, and the side entry.
side entry, and if the motion is to approve it as presented, then it has 2 driveways. I don't know which design there were.
my motion will accept a friendly amendment if somebody wants to amend it.
Say that again, please,
Driveway.
Stephen.
I said my motion will accept a friendly amendment if somebody wants to eliminate the second driveway.
Okay, well, I would like to eliminate the second driveway. And what about the paving of the, let's say, the first driveway? The asphalt or the block pavers?
I don't have a problem with the block pavers.
Yeah, well, I'm not, I tend to agree with Elizabeth Kim that they're not always successful, and I still have my concern just as a walking surface, quite frankly. But I'd like to hear from other board members on that.
Yeah, I would favor the pavers. If I don't know if there's a way they can be done more successfully, but I would support that as an approach.
Okay, well, I guess we could say, what does the applicant want? You know, Mr. Kennedy, I mean,
Well, I'll say from the variance perspective, it actually doesn't change the amount of coverage, since the porous pavement still requires the variance. We would have the same number either way. The only difference would be the board, by if the motion doesn't include the second driveway, you're eliminating 102 square feet of coverage. Other than that, the material isn't really part of the variance. So we proposed it as, but it could be done something administratively, frankly, with the stormwater treatment later on that worked out with engineering. I think the variances.
So what are you saying, that that would be a discussion between the applicant and the engineer and the town engineer?
I think so. You know, they had asked for, you know, mitigation, and that's one type of mitigation to do that, and maybe there's something else that's worked out.
All right, so we'll then make that decision, or at least we could add that it would be a discussion between the applicant and the borough and the municipal engineer. We also have the other concerns of HPC about reviewing the landscape plan, which I think the applicant has agreed to, and the screening of the mechanical units. Let's see, what else?
Condition 1 or recommendation 1, that's asking for exploratory work before and during assembling the building to provide documentation of the structure.
So maybe we'll just let our architect address that. So we agreed to, I just want to have Max clarify our understanding of that language. To be honest with you, there was a little bit of confusion this evening on our part. But just if Max, you could speak to the condition that we're okay with. You know, I don't, it would be exploratory prior to, that's our preference.
Yeah, we agreed to do some exploratory selective demolition on the interior of the house to see if there was any fabric worth trying to save.
Right, we had agreed to do exploration prior to demolition, not exploratory demolition, though, not taking it apart piece by piece.
No, just, you know, taking some drywall off, seeing if there's any, and it was more like, oh, there was siding here. Truly, I think the house has been so reworked that there's really not much existing.
Yeah, I would think at this point, it appears you've done enough to know that there's probably not a lot you can save here.
There really isn't anything.
Yeah.
But we still said that we would look.
Okay, if you agree to look, you can look.
And then Elizabeth, the demolition permit application process, that's dictated by the municipal ordinance, right?
That's correct. I think it's just, it was just reiterating that that is a requirement to be
Okay.
submitted to HPC and the construction official.
And is there, Derek, and Michael, actually, is there anything that we can put in here that would advise, I guess, the construction team on this project to maybe provide alternate parking somewhere, or look at not overcrowding the street? And I can appreciate that, because when you have construction in a neighborhood and you do get a number of tradesmen out there, you get a lot of cars and they show up early and stay late.
I guess you can make that suggestion. I forget, is it permit parking on that street? Can you park there you can't park there for all day, right?
No,
It's
it's
2 hour,
2 hour.
2 hour parking on that street,
Okay,
and no overnight parking
okay, without a permit.
without a
I think
permit.
it's 2
That's
hours.
right.
But the 2 hour parking can be at least, at least to help to minimize the number of they'd have to move them.
Right.
Yeah.
And then,
Yeah, but I think right now, they're not handing out a lot of tickets under the virus, and there's,
Oh, sure.
the streets don't quite fill up with a lot of shoppers, especially the first half of the week.
Okay.
It gets all tight Wednesday, Thursday, Saturday. So, and the other thing, most everybody on that street, not everyone, has driveways.
Mm-hmm.
So you're stopping a neighbor from parking for 15 minutes or whatever, but they do have driveways.
Yeah.
I think there's technically only 2 addresses that don't have driveways.
And in this case, there is going to be a drive, which there's part of this that won't be built on, which will be a driveway, which can accommodate construction vehicles while the house is being built. So,
And then I guess the board did have discussion about a stormwater management condition, as staff recommended that it would go to engineering
yes,
for review.
yes.
Okay.
That the applicant and the municipal engineer will agree on a mitigation plan. Is there anything that we've left out?
This point be a technical one, because it didn't make Derek's memo, but there was as part of the front door confusion or requirement with the entrance, there was that requirement for the sidewalk, that pea gravel sidewalk from the side main entrance, if that is what it is, to the street. I think HPC and we thought that was excessive. I don't know if it's technically subsumed in that other variance. I just want to make it clear, or the board to make it clear, if you find that to be unnecessary like we do, that be part of the relief from the front door part of the variance.
Well, what are you saying? You're going to eliminate the sidewalk?
That was the testimony, yes. Yes.
So basically people would walk past the steps at the porch and then walk down the driveway to the side entrance?
Yes, and that again, making it appear more like that the front porch is the front entrance.
Is the front, and then that area where the sidewalk was will be planting.
I would imagine so, or lawn.
Excuse
Then
me?
in that scenario, the driveway then would have to be a solid surface if people are going to be walking on it.
Yes. Yeah. Okay, but then there would be planting. Yes, it would be. Okay. All right. Would you prefer the solid surface to the pavers?
With one driveway, yes.
Yes.
Yeah. With two, we're open to different ideas.
Okay.
As well as if there are two driveways, then I could commit during construction to not having any construction vehicles park on the street. They would all either park on property or elsewhere.
That's on the two driveways.
Right, two driveways.
All right. So, Karen, do you want to somehow
Summarize? Okay. I believe there was, all right, the motion was made to approve the project as presented, with the exception that there would be only one driveway, which has been described as the long driveway or the right-hand driveway. The applicants indicated that that's the fact, then they would prefer to provide a solid surface on that driveway, not the pavers. The project as presented requires a variance for floor area, lot area, lot width, rear yard setback, side yard setback, impervious coverage, variance with respect to the main entrance being on the side of the house, setback, driveway setback, and the distance between the building and the windows, which is section 17A-283 variance. I believe the motion would also require that the applicant now confer with the municipal engineer with respect to appropriate stormwater management for the site. And
also the HPC.
yeah, certain HPC conditions, which I think are number one, that's the exploratory work, which the applicant says they will do before the demolition of the building to see if something can be salvaged. They'll also need the demolition permit, but that's pursuant to the existing code anyway. They've already agreed to pay. I'm sorry?
I think the final one is the HPC subcommittee review of the landscaping.
Right.
Correct. I don't think there's anything else.
Now, what is the driveway setback question?
Okay, Derek's memo indicates, all right, the code requires a driveway setback of 3 feet from the side lot line for lots less than 50 feet in width. The proposed setback for the east driveway is 1 foot. The setback for the west driveway is 0 feet.
Okay, well, the west driveway is going to be eliminated.
Right, so.
Okay, so it's just a 1 foot setback for the
Yeah.
east driveway. Okay.
Right.
All right. Stephen, is this acceptable to you? You made the motion.
It is acceptable. I accept it.
Excellent. Okay. Any discussion on the motion?
We need a second.
I know. I'm saying if there's any discussion. Okay, so do we have a second?
Yes,
Okay, George.
I second.
Okay. Okay. Claudia?
Okay, Mr. Cohen,
Yes.
Polson,
Yes.
DeFloy,
Yes.
Shriver,
Yes.
Penn,
Yes.
Mr. Stein. Was that a yes? I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
I'm sorry. Yes, the answer is yes.
Thank you.
Sorry.
Okay, well, thank you very much for coming out. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
We appreciate your consideration and your time. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Well,
Okay. All right. Let's see. It's not morning yet. Let's Let's see, now our next case is, carries the number Z 2020-849, 22 Stockton Street, Block 3701, Lot 17 in the R3 zone. Mr. Bridger?
Mr. Bridger, before you begin your testimony, I just want to note that the noticing is in order and the board has jurisdiction to hear the application.
Thank you, Karen. The applicant is the Rector, Wardens, and Vestrymen of Trinity Church. They're the owner and applicant. They are seeking a use variance pursuant to NJSA 40:55D-71 and related site plan application to permit the conversion of the Trinity Counseling Center, a permitted non-residential conditional use affiliated with Trinity Church, to an office use in a zone where such use is not permitted. They've also requested a sign variance. Subject property is located in the R3 and it's subject to the use and bulk regulations in section 17A 241 and 242. The site contains 3.12 acres and is the home to Trinity Church and Ivy Hall. Site improvements include 2 parking lots, a playground for the daycare center at the church. The existing Trinity Counseling Center is a permitted non-residential use. The site's bound to the north by Stockton Street and the Princeton Municipal Building, to the west by the Trinity Church, to the east by the Witherspoon Institute, another permitted non-conditional use, and to the south by Mercer Street and the Trinity Church Rectory. Some zoning background: in 1977, the Princeton Regional Planning Board granted conditional use and minor site plan approval to convert the existing residence at 22 Stockton to a counseling center affiliated with the church. Bulk variances were granted at the time for a front yard setback. The copies have been submitted to you today. The planning board set the parking requirement at that time for 11 spaces and granted a site plan waiver with the condition that the parking issue be reviewed in 3 years. The file notes indicated it was reviewed in 1980 and approved. And there appears to be another review in 1981. I couldn't find evidence of how the outcome of that hearing, but the parking appears to have continued as it was approved until present day. Staff has not received any complaints about the site. In November of 2019, Trinity Counseling moved its operations to another location in Princeton. The applicant is seeking approval to lease the existing office space to therapists, licensed psychologists, social workers, a structural integration practitioner, a physical therapist, and a nonprofit organization that provides training that helps prepare volunteers with the education and tools needed to train the incarcerated individuals. The existing 2,800 square foot building will be leased to 10 tenants. No improvements are proposed to the building or the site. The proposed office use is not permitted in the D1 residential zone. A D1 variance is permitted, required. The applicant should show special reasons to justify the relief granted as required by the state statute. The reasons must be shown to be unique or peculiar to the property for which the variance is requested and not generally applicable to neighboring properties. And they should address why the strict application of the zoning prohibition of the requested use or development would deprive the applicant of reasonable use of the land or buildings involved, and evidence that the requested relief may be granted without detriment of the public good or impairment of the intent of the zoning plan. Should also describe how the proposed use relates to the master plan and the proposal's impact on the neighborhood, the community's needs, and set forth the legal argument for the proposal, as well as other pertinent information. They do have a bulk variance for a sign. Signs are not permitted in the R3 business signs, so they're proposing a very, I would say, modest 14-inch by 6-inch sign that identifies the building as the Belshaw House. A sign variance is requested, and the applicant has submitted a required minor site plan. The site's fully developed. No improvements are proposed. The applicant has requested waiver from the site plan checklist. Staff has no objection to the granting of that waiver if the board sees it fit. The site is located within the Mercer Hill Historic District. No exterior changes are proposed except for the aforementioned sign. The Historic Preservation Commission has reviewed the application and has no comment since there aren't any external changes. They will review the sign administratively. The planning board set the parking requirement for the building at 11 spaces. The site contains approximately 42 spaces. The applicant should address how parking will be accommodated with a new similar type of office use. And that's my memo. If you have any questions, I'd be glad to address them.
Anyone, questions? Okay, before we begin, can you give me, I need 2 minutes. So can we just take a brief break here for 2 minutes?
Sure.
Thank you.
And also the person running running the Zoom meeting, could you pull in our planner, Tiffany Morrissey? Did someone pull her in already? No, I think she's still listed as an attendee. Can you bring her in as a panelist?
Okay, it's done.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
I think that's it.
Okay.
Okay, I'm sorry for the delay. I'm back. If everybody else is ready to begin, I'm ready. Everybody else here? I see George disappeared and both Bernices have disappeared. Oh, George is back. Bernice, are you here? Okay, let's wait a minute for Bernice. And Stephen, if he's back yet. All right, so we'll just wait 1 minute. Okay, Stephen's back. Now we need at least one Bernice to show up.
And her cat.
Okay. Okay, we're all here. Okay, Mr. DeGrazia.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm Christopher DeGrazia from the law firm of Fagery, Drinker, Biddle, and Reith, here on behalf of the applicant, Rector Warden's Vestry Bend Trinity Church. Derek had put together a very detailed introduction and covered most of the material. I do want to make clear that the application this evening is for a D1 variance for office use, but the office use being proposed is limited in scope. And that office use would be limited in scope and related to basically counseling, wellness, and educational services. As Derek had pointed out, there's a long history. It was approved back in 1977, where the building was a residential structure and was converted to offices for Trinity Counseling Services. That use essentially has continued there, for whatever, over 40 years. Trinity, as Derek mentioned, has left the building and found a different location in Princeton, and the church would like to continue this service that has been provided for the last 40 years at the location, which would include counseling, wellness, and educational services for residents of the community. As stated, there's nothing being changed to the site. So there's no site plan changes, there's no building changes. Everything that you see today is exactly what's being proposed, with the exception of the door sign. And I say sign, but it's really just a plaque. It's 6 inches by 14 inches, I believe. So it's a very small plaque. Other than that, it's essentially, there's no changes to the site. And it may be a little confusing, but it's because the ordinance itself allows a certain number of uses that are not residential in this particular zone, the R3 zone. And it permits, uses such as churches, places of worship, philanthropic institutions, educational institutions and uses. But when we look at what we're proposing here, we're looking at individual psychologists, therapists coming in and not necessarily organized or practicing under the name of a nonprofit. And essentially, that's the difference that we're asking for. So even though this use has existed for 4 decades, and we would like to continue the use, the element that changes is that it's not just going to be limited to those practicing under a nonprofit title or business. And with that being said, I'd like to introduce Reverend Paul Jeans. Reverend, I see you're on to tell us a little bit more about the property and what's going on there.
Sure. Thank you for your time.
Reverend, we just have to swear you in before you begin testifying. So do you swear or affirm your testimony will be truthful?
Absolutely, I do.
Thank you.
Sure. So thank you for your time. I didn't realize these went so long. So I think they think about my sermons last this long. I think for some people they think. But I appreciate your time because I know the night is getting late. So Derek and Christopher have already explained the details of the situation much better than I could have explained it. But the building has been part of our campus for almost 100 years and it's fraternity counseling for over 40. They decided to buy their own building, as has been said. So we're left with this wonderful space and we wanted to continue to use this space for some kind of community good. So we didn't know how to do that. So we were looking at not-for-profits, looking at different options. And so it came in sort of serendipitous way as we were looking and talking to not-for-profits and other organizations in the town. When the sale of 20 Nassau Street was announced to create the sort of hotel there. And I had no idea, living here for 12 years, I had no idea that there were almost 100 mental health professionals who made their home in 20 Nassau. So many health professionals caring for our community and for the university. And now they were sort of like, where are we going to go in this town in which the space is limited? So we began to get calls and we said, this is a perfect match for what we've already doing, continuing the continuity, the consistency with what had been offered there before, and also in complete alignment and meshed with our ongoing ministry of the church. So we have basically the first floor will be sort of our anchor tenant, which will be PD Green, which is a non-for-profit agency which provides educational support for those who are incarcerated. And the first floors was where the administrative offices were for Trinity Counseling. And then on the top 2 floors, there's 8 or 9 small consultation rooms, which really didn't lend themselves so much for other agencies sort of having their offices there, but they're smaller consultation spaces. And these sort of had a beautiful fit with those counselors and therapists and healthcare providers that needed space. So we filled it up rather quickly, and we had no idea that we had to get a zoning variance until folks said, well, you can't do that. So that's why we're here. We didn't know we couldn't do that. And we didn't know that it was suddenly considered for profit. So that's why we're here. So the work is going to be the same work. And our goal is always to provide services that are for the community good and for the benefit of those around us. So that's kind of why we're here, to make that happen. So the same work will be happening, except for the not-for-profit PD Green that'll be there, therapeutic work, mental health care, social workers, mental health care providers, to provide care for our community and the Princeton students. And there was, all of them stated, a need to be within walking distance of the university and on public transportation routes. So those were two important factors, and they were so happy that they could be right there again with good and accessibility to their clients. So we're asking for that variation. And then we had conversation with our neighbors with the Mercer Hill Historic District, of which we are a part. And we've had some conversation with them, and I think they're here tonight, maybe they'll give testimony later, about their concerns that they did not want to see this variance sort of open up into a, well, now there's something commercial going on, something for profit going on, which might open the door for other things. So we've had some very good conversations with them and working with them and trying to tighten up this proposal as best we can, because they want to see us to do the work we want to do. They're supportive of the work we want to do. So we're trying to tighten up the proposal with Christopher's help to make sure that we can do what we want to do without in any way doing anything that would negatively impact the Mercer Hill Historic District. So we want to make sure that we maintain the integrity of that district while maintaining our mission and ministry and being able to provide something for our community. So that's where I am. I'm a preacher, so I could go on longer, but I think I'll stop.
I have a question,
Sure.
a basic question.
Sure.
Does the fact that you're going to operate in a sense of for-profit situation now for part of the building affect your property tax situation?
Derek tells us that. So Derek says that they carve out those 8 units that would be for, and we will pay taxes on those units. So there is some sort of formula there in which we will be participating to the tax base and paying for that space.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
I have a question. Can we
Yes, sir.
approve this for office space with conditions that the use be essentially, as you've laid it out, a social service type of use? That's
Yes, sir.
probably a question for Ms. Casey. Can we make that sort of condition?
George, can you speak a little
I
louder?
can't hear
Yes,
you.
I'm sorry. Can we approve this for office space with the condition that it be restricted to social service types of tenants? Is that within our power and purview?
I guess that's the testimony. I would imagine we can. Is that right, Karen?
Yes, I mean, it sounds like that's what the applicant is proposing. So certainly, if it's the applicant that's suggesting this, yes, you could certainly have a limitation.
That's valid. That's good. Sure.
And I have some language I started to draft and put together that gets to the heart of it and lists out, I think, what we're looking at as opposed to what would be prohibited. And I think that would be helpful later on after our planner testifies.
Okay. I'm sorry to interrupt you. Did you have another witness or not?
I do, our planner.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Paul. So this is our planner, Tiffany Morrissey. I would like to have her sworn in and qualified.
Okay.
Ms. Morrissey, if you would raise your right hand, do you swear or affirm your testimony this evening will be truthful?
I do.
Can you touch upon your qualifications?
Yes, I'm a licensed professional planner in the state of New Jersey, as well as a member of the American Institute of Certified Planners with a Master's of City Planning from University of Pennsylvania. And I've been practicing since 1995, licensed since 1998, and had my own firm since 2004 throughout, representing clients throughout New Jersey, as well as representing boards throughout New Jersey. I can do more, but I know it's after 10, and so.
It's okay. I'm comfortable if anybody else has any questions, but I'm okay with that.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you.
So because we require a D variance, I have to provide you some testimony on the positive and the negative criteria. I'll try to keep it brief because I think this is a pretty simple application in terms of what we're requesting here. This property, as you know, is in the R3 zone. It has operated as part of the church campus for a number of years, and we're requesting to kind of alter how we're basically renting the space, not so much using the space. And because of that, we require a D1 use variance. Back in 1977, the applicant was granted a similar use variance for the Trinity Counseling Services, and today we wish to expand upon that and allow other users in the community to continue to provide those same services that the church feels are important to reaching out to the local area. There are two aspects to the positive criteria. One is that you can find that the use is an inherently beneficial use and therefore meets the positive criteria. And in this case, I think that because it relates back to the church missions and the church goals and the church objectives, and is part of the church campus, that there is the ability to find that this proposed variance is as also an inherently beneficial use. But I also believe you can find that it meets the more stringent standards of the D1 use variance criteria, and that the site and the use are particularly suited to one another. And that is because the existing improvements on the site and the historic use of the property really show that there is a unique fit for this type of counseling service, coupled with what we just heard from the Reverend, that there's a need in the community for space for mental health professionals that provide a service to the community, and that this location provides them that walkability and accessibility to their clientele, which marries well with the church campus and the church mission in terms of providing a service to the community. And when you put that together, that the site and the use become particularly suited to one another. So not only is it an inherently beneficial use, which would carry through, but it also meets the more stringent standards of being particularly suited to one another, providing an appropriate location for a use that is needed within the community. In terms of the negative criteria, if you're, is there a substantial impairment of your master plan and your zoning ordinance? I do not believe that this proposed application creates a substantial impairment to your master plan and zoning ordinance. Your master plan, last re-examined in 2017, talked about ensuring the proper balance between land uses, preserving historic sites, and maintaining the character of neighborhoods, and also balancing the institutional needs with neighborhood protection and protecting the community tax base. And that was a continuing concern from 2007 through 2017. I think when you look at those goals and objectives of your master plan and what we're trying to achieve here, and to continue the use of this building in the same fashion that it has been used for over 40 years, continues to advance those purposes of your master plan. And in terms of the zoning ordinance, this is consistent with the uses that have existed in and around the area, including the surrounding land uses, not just the church, but the Witherspoon Institute and other educational type uses and training facilities and nonprofits that exist in and around the area. In terms of will there be a substantial detriment to the public good, I also believe that we can address those concerns, and we do that in part through the reasonable conditions in terms of limiting the use to the types of counseling and wellness and educational services that we've discussed in terms of the mission that the church has in serving the community. Note that more than ever, we need to make sure we keep our mental health professionals close and near. A lot of people need that counseling and need that assistance, more so today. Well, not even more so today, but definitely today is more noticeable. So to provide an opportunity for those existing professionals in your community to continue to reach out to those other persons in your community through the church property and this facility really gives a good opportunity and doesn't create a substantial detriment to the public good. We are not changing anything on the property. We have adequate parking to accommodate the use. It's practiced as such for over 40 years. We have no need for changes to the site. The only small change is a sign to identify the name of a door plaque, not even a commercial sign. It's 4 by 14 by 6 inches, so it's very small. So I think that it continues to fit well into the community and not cause a substantial detriment. So when you balance the inherently beneficial use aspect of this, the fact that the site and the use are particularly suited to one another, and then the goals and objectives of your master plan that continue to be advanced, and the fact that there's really no changes to the site, so there's no substantial detriment to the public good, in balance, I believe you can find that the positives substantially outweigh the negative. And I know our attorney has some language in terms of the restriction of uses, which will help with that concerned to make sure that it is limited to what we are proposing. And as with all use variances, they are all based upon the testimony and the record created. And so those conditions will be part of what we present to you this evening.
Okay, thank you.
My short version, but I can do longer if you want.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you. So in thinking about the concerns raised by the Mercer Hill Historic District Association, I sort of thought about this in two ways. One is first that we are proposing an office use essentially linked to the church's mission. It was very similar to what was approved in 1977, where there was a nexus between the services and the church's mission of, serving the community. So if there was a change where the property was no longer used as a church or a house of worship, then the use, this variance for the profit office would also be tied to that. So if the church leaves or house of worship is no longer on the property, then that variance would expire. So that's the first. And I see Karen thinking about it.
I am.
If it works, it works. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. But I think it makes a very nice connection, because it really is the story that was from 1977, and that there is, this connection between what's being proposed and the church. So the second is to take a look at the office use itself and limit it to office use that furthers the church's objectives of promoting mental health, education, and well-being. And in saying that, you have to provide examples. So the types of tenants that we have coming in or that we can envision would be mental health professionals, counselors, therapists, psychologists, psychiatrists, licensed clinical social workers, people that have PhDs or PsyDs, those are doctors in psychology, physiotherapists, structural integration practitioners and physical therapists, and nutritionists. And they basically all fall in that promoting mental health, education, and well-being. We also have that nonprofit that is related to the educational, but I don't even know if that one really needs a variance, because that one is philanthropic use and is allowed under its own right. In contrast, the office uses that would not be permitted would be, general professional offices, including lawyers. I thought I had to put that one up front. Architects, engineers, medical doctors, for example, something with a more intense practice like a family practice, or surgeons, an infectious disease specialist, dentists, someone that goes beyond into a more intense medical type of practice. Also, any general commercial business use that does not further the mission of the church in promoting mental health, education, and well-being. So you can have a whole bunch of things there, from everything from a realtor's office to, an investment office, because they would not further or promote mental health, education, or well-being. So that's sort of how we were thinking about it. And like I said, we're really just trying to preserve what's been going on for many years and address and anticipate a need of the community.
Christopher, I had one question for you. So you're saying the first part of that condition would be if the church no longer owns the building?
Well, I didn't say church no longer owns. I said if the church use ceased to exist. I didn't want to make it personal to any one church, but to use itself so that it wouldn't be problematic in terms of the law. So my thought is, if we link it to a house of worship and the house of worship is no longer on the property, then this use, which is tied to it by a nexus, is no longer permitted. So I want to be very clear so that it was a condition that was enforceable and not something that was just, personal or in a way that would run afoul of the municipal land use law. Because like I said, we're really trying to protect the zone and at the same time allow these great services to continue.
Okay, is that your presentation right now?
That is.
Okay, do any of the board members have any questions of the applicant or the witnesses? Okay. I guess we'll open it up to the public to see if there's any. I see some names down there. Can we see if someone would like to speak? Claudia, Eve, are there?
Yes.
Okay, we have someone.
Yes. Hello. I'm Jack Kerr. I'm here on behalf of the Mercer Hill Historic District Association. Tom Chapman, who is the president of the association, I know is also hoping to speak, and I've asked him to make sure he raises his hand so he gets in the queue. But
Mr. Kerr, before you continue, one question. Can we see you? We don't see any.
Hold on.
Oh.
Hold on.
Okay. Start my video.
Oh,
there you go.
Okay.
Great. And then, Mr. Kerr, we need to swear you in. So if you would raise your right hand, do you swear or affirm your testimony this evening will be truthful?
I do.
Thank you.
As I said, I'm here on behalf of the Mercer Hills Historic District Association. I'm here with my wife, Nora. We live at 42 Mercer Street, which is directly across the street from Trinity Church, and we've been residents living here in Princeton for over 35 years. The two of us have been involved with the Mercer Hill Association for most of that time, and we have served as directors of the board and as officers. We have submitted a written submission, which I trust you have, and I just want to briefly summarize our concern and what we hope might be points for a resolution. First, our concern. As you know, the R3 zoning in the historic district does not permit commercial use. Granting this variance will set a precedent. Others who want to convert residences or educational buildings in this district to commercial use would certainly point to it as a precedent. That's our concern. There are many residences and educational buildings in this district that might be converted into lawyers' offices or doctors' offices or dentists' offices. And if that became a trend, it would fundamentally change the character of this neighborhood and historic district. And this is a major concern. The Mercer Hill Historic District Association was actually formed as a nonprofit in order to resist a commercial encroachment in 1999. by a construction company that wanted to create construction offices in a building in the district. And thankfully, that litigation resulted in the Princeton class of 1955 purchasing the building and continuing its nonprofit use. I first want to make an observation. It seems to us that there may be a way to accommodate the church's continued use of this property without a formal variance. It's a continuation of an historical use that has been there for, as you heard, 40 years. The property will be continued to be owned by the church, and it'll be used by the church to provide counseling services, which are part of its broader religious mission. So it seems to us, not being zoning specialists, that it is a permitted use within the district, which permits nonprofit use of the properties in the R3 zone. However, if this board decides that a variance is necessary, and we recognize the complications of the intricacies of the zoning law, we urge that the variance be narrowly drafted and conditioned so it will not serve as a precedent for other commercial development in the historic district. And we think there are two essential conditions that should be part of any variance granted. The first one is that the variance should not run with the land. It should be limited to Trinity Church's ownership and use of the property. That's number one. And number two, the use should be limited to Trinity Church providing counseling services as has been described as part of its broader religious mission. The use of the property should be consistent with the way the property has been used historically. And I'd like to conclude by saying that Trinity Church is a valued neighbor. It's been one of the most important members of this historic district. We have absolutely no concerns about the historic use of 22 Stockton Street. We look forward to its continued use, but we hope it can be done in a way that won't adversely affect this historic district and R3 neighborhood in other ways. Thank you.
You're welcome. Next speaker.
I'm not sure that people understand they have to raise their hand in order to be noticed. So maybe that could be made clear.
Okay, we have, there are three other people out there. Mr. Unetic, Tom Chapman, and Stephen Kern.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
We can hear
Tom
you.
Chapman.
Can you put your video on, Mr. Chapman?
Well, I've been outfoxed by Zoom once, and so I'm trying to improve on that track record. Just give me a clue as to how I can do that.
Move your
Share
cursor
screen.
to the lower left. Move your cursor to the bottom of your screen.
Yeah.
You should have a bunch of icons pop up. One.
Start my video.
Yeah. So hit the video.
Oh,
There you go.
that's it.
Success. Excellent. Thank you. I
All right,
apologize.
Mr. Chapman, we're just going to swear you in.
Of course.
And then you can, if you'd raise your right hand, you swear or affirm your testimony this evening will be truthful.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
I think Jack covered a whole lot of ground, but before I make one comment, I just want to introduce myself, Tom Chapman. I'm the president, as Jack said, of the Mercer Hill Historic District Association. We being myself, my wife Ann, who's next to me here, not on the screen, have owned our house for 40 years. So we're longtime members of the Princeton community. We're at 14 Alexander Street, which puts us just a stone's throw away from Trinity Church. And as Jack said, Trinity has been absolute rock of support, fun. All sorts of good things come from Trinity, and so we are very grateful to be part of, to share our part of the community with them. As Paul said in his opening remarks, he was very generous in indicating that we really are on the same page, I think, about what we need to do here. We had a meeting with Paul and a couple of his associates earlier this week when we got wind of, after we had gotten wind late last week of the variance application and sent in our then objection to it. We had a very, very healthy conversation with Paul and company and explained our concerns, which Jack just articulated. And Paul and company, not surprisingly, totally understood. They also understood that we are very much supporting their mission, the purposes with which they want to use 22 Stockton. What we want to do is just protect against commercial creep, I'll call it. And I think that the details that that are starting to address that are the key to accomplishing the shared goals of Trinity Church and the Mercer Hill Historic District Association.
Okay. Is that the completion of your statement,
Yes,
Mr.
it
Graham?
is.
Okay, thank you. We have two other people who are out there, Stephen Kern and Phil Unetic.
Those are some of my parish folks that I think are here to support and make sure, if we need some backup and add moral support to the operation. Absolutely. And they know to keep a short leash on me too. So they got to watch what I'm doing because my mouth can go.
Okay, no sermons. All right. So if either of the two would like to speak, if not, then, well, I guess we'll wait a second to see if they do want to speak. If not, we'll close the public portion of our hearing.
Yeah, this is Phil. I really have nothing else to add, just here to back up my priest in Trinity Church.
Okay, thank you. And Mr. Kern, if you'd like to say anything, please do it. Okay. Okay, so let's close the public portion of the hearing. Mr. DeGrazia, do you want to make a closing statement?
No, I think we said everything we need to say. I heard about this yesterday, and as we got ready for the meeting today, I heard the Mercer Hill Historic District's concerns, and that's the language I proposed, hopefully to address those concerns. I appreciate their time coming out and speaking tonight and letting us know about their concerns so that we are able to put something together, hopefully to get us to a spot where they're protected and the Mercer Hill Historic District does not have any creep.
Okay.
Mr. DeGrazia, I've got one question for you.
Sure.
The first prong of this condition that you're proposing is, you're saying as long as the building is owned by a house of worship?
Yeah, so the property is owned by the Trinity Church, and so long as there is a church use on that property, this variance will be allowed. to the extent, that it's sold to a developer or the church or I'm losing the name that they use it in the ordinance. I think it's called House of Worship maybe, ceases, then the variance to allow the for-profit uses would expire.
The reason I'm pressing is because I'm looking at the conditional use approval that was given by the planning board a number of years ago.
Mhm.
And in that, they found that there was a sufficient relationship between Trinity Church and Trinity Counseling Service sufficient to establish the use as a church use. So with that finding, they were able to approve it as a conditional use without any kind of a variance. As they said, members of the church serve on Trinity's board, et cetera.
Yep.
So what I'm trying to figure out is, although it sounds unlikely, if Trinity Church were to move from its church and a different religious organization moved into that space, and as part of that transfer, they acquired this building, your position would be then the use of the office, the use of the building for offices could continue
Related to the
as
mission.
it's promoting the mission of that religious group, whatever it might be, correct?
Yeah, and I'm only phrasing it that way because I think it satisfies the law requirements. I'm okay with you saying that it's linked to Trinity Church, but I don't think that's enforceable. So I'm just trying to be honest to the board and, figure out a way that protects them and not put a condition that I know that I doubt will be enforceable. And that's really why I'm phrasing it that way. So I'm fine with whatever language you want to use in that particular nexus, but I think the way I proposed it is the most protective of the Mercer Hill Historic District Association and its intent, what they're trying to do. So you can't just in general, my feeling is you can't make it personal to an individual. So I took out that element and I didn't say it's only for this applicant, and I made it only for that use. So if another use or Trinity changed its name and combined with another church and it was called Trinity something else, then those counseling uses would still be allowed. Again, the use itself would still be restricted. You couldn't bring in, a doctor's office or a dentist. So I thought that was the best way to protect the intent, but certainly the board has the ability to look at it and come up with something if they think they could do, come up with something more protective.
Well, they might be able to. I'm just not sure they can do it in the next 10 minutes. So, because it seems to me that a house of worship, that's pretty broad. So if you're saying it's going to carry out the missions of the house of worship.
But it's also limited to the phrase that I used before, which would be promoting mental health, education, and well-being. And again, I gave the list of the uses that would fit in that category, being mental health professionals, counselors, therapists, psychologists, psychiatrists, that list, as very specific. So you can't, I don't know if I can get any more specific than that. And I think the ordinance could talk about what's prohibited as well, which is the other list I gave. I had some catch-all language if it doesn't, general offices that doesn't promote mental health, education, and well-being, as well as professional offices, lawyers, architects, engineers, medical doctors, like family practitioners. I think that was the language I used. Infectious disease specialists, dentists, there's a lot of different urologists, there's tons of doctors. But I think if the board articulates that in the resolution, it would be very clear for anybody reading it.
I mean, the purpose of linking this to a house of worship is to try and address the concern that's been raised by the neighbors. Right?
Correct. So it doesn't, because variants essentially run with the land, and I'm trying to find a way to have it so that it's enforceable, because you can't just come up and say it doesn't run with the land. So now I have it run with the use.
Can we just say that obviously the two lists that you created, the proposed uses and the unacceptable uses or inappropriate uses, and then can we say it basically stays with Trinity Church if the church is sold or another church takes over, that they would have to basically come back in?
Why can't we say it doesn't run with the land? That's what I thought. I thought that was an option always.
Well, it's not usually an option, but in this particular instance, I'm just wondering, since the church itself, I assume that would be acceptable to the church.
If that's what the board feels like putting in there, I have no problem with it. I mean, I was just trying to be protective. But if the board is comfortable with that language, that's fine with me.
Karen, is that reasonable?
Well, I mean, honestly, I would prefer to be able to work with the language a little bit. That means, though, that it's not going to get approved tonight because I would think, or it has to get carried to another night, because I assume that the neighbors want to hear what that language is, and they'd like to be able to comment on it. It just seems to me that the goal that the neighbors are trying to accomplish is that it is linked to Trinity's ownership of it, and that
Michael would like to say something?
I'm sorry.
I feel more comfortable if it does not run with the land, and we have made approvals in the past.
Yes.
So essentially it runs with ownership.
Right. And that's right, we have done that in the past.
Yeah.
And then you can link that up with, the uses we're basically approving. But the overriding thing is it runs with ownership, not with the land.
Right. Right. I agree with that.
Christopher, I'm assuming that is acceptable to
we don't object to that, if that phrase, if that's what you want to put in there. And it is important for us to move forward, because we do have tenants that really want to use that space like 2 weeks ago or a month ago. Their mental health is declining. I know it's getting late.
Yeah, I think that there is a way we can justify this in terms of, based on how it's being presented to the board, that it's linked to the mission of Trinity Church.
Sure.
So on that basis, I think that we could tie this to their ownership, meaning it does not run with the land, and that if they choose to sell the property, the church building, then the new owner will have to come back if they want to continue to make that use of the property.
Right. I think you're right, Karen. Tying it to the mission of Trinity Church is specific enough, with the limitations that Mr. DeGrazia has.
Articulated.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm assuming that the neighbors who have come out to express their concern, I assume that this, or are they comfortable? Do they feel this meets their concerns as well? Do we hear any objection or?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
No, I think if the variance makes clear that it does not run with the land, and secondly, that it's tied to the Trinity Church mission as as articulated by Mr. DeGrazia, that really takes care of our major concerns.
Good, good. That's our intent also. Mr. Chapman, are you comfortable with this?
Tom, you're on mute. Tom, you're on mute.
There we go.
There you go.
Yes, absolutely. This sounds like an excellent solution.
Okay.
I'd like to compliment Mr. DeGrazio and Tiffany for responding so quickly to something that came up at kind of the 11th hour. So thank you so much for that.
You're welcome.
Okay, Karen, do we have something we can react to?
All right, so I think the motion would be that you are approving the application for conversion of the Trinity Counseling Center to an office use for social service professionals with the following caveats: that the office uses that are permitted there will be to promote the mental health, education, and well-being of their clients. That
a community.
I'm
not
sorry,
finance.
community.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, community. That general office use will not be permitted, and examples of such general office use could include lawyers, doctors, engineers, dentists, realtors, investment offices, and similar offices along those lines. And that this variance is linked to Trinity's ownership of this building and the property, since this presentation to us has indicated that the mental health uses the church feels are a continuation of their mission in the community to promote mental health and well-being among everyone in the community. So that's a little long-winded, but if somebody wants to move that and reference
Well,
it.
let me ask you, there are two other things. Don't we have to mention the signage?
Oh, yes, absolutely right. And they need
And the
a
parking? Do we want to say anything about the parking?
Jarek, your memo indicates that, I guess it's been reviewed periodically. I don't know that there's a need to continually review it, but.
I mean, I think if you have a 40-year period that you've observed, not you, but the town has observed, there's been conditions. I haven't received any complaints, and I will note that in the last 5 years, I believe the town had parking meters that they leased from the church, and those parking meters have been removed. So there's even more parking on site than there was when the initial approval was approved. So, I mean, I just put it out there for due diligence for the board to look at that as an issue. And then, you know, I think you should grant the waivers for the site plan if you're comfortable, since there are no site improvements. So.
So we don't need to say anything about the parking further to what's been said?
No, because it looks like it's compliant.
Yeah, exactly.
So they don't need any more spaces. They have more spaces than they need. So,
Right. And the signage we need to mention the signage in here too.
yes, they have a proposed sign, and I understand, Derek, you would be looking at the sign itself administratively?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
That's
And
fine.
then they need minor site plan approval with waivers for various documentation, which the staff recommends can be granted since there's no exterior changes being proposed.
Okay, I don't know how to, you want to, you need to read.
How about simply asking if somebody wants to move?
If I may, the language of the motion did not use the words "does not run with the land." I thought that was one of the main elements of the agreement. that the variance will not run with the
I
land.
think we said that. If
Well-
we didn't, I think the way we phrased it was that it would run with Trinity's ownership, but Bill,
Exactly.
we can certainly add that obviously then it's not going to run with the limits.
Okay.
Yeah, that was the intent on discussing Trinity and that. Okay. All right, if there are no other discussion of the motion, and if the board doesn't have any questions on the motion, does somebody want to make a motion? Or any questions on the wording, to the extent that we know the wording right now? We know the intent. We don't know the exact words. We'll see them, and that'll be in the memorialization.
I make a motion.
Okay. No other discussion on the
Second.
motion? Okay.
Who's second?
Stephen.
Mr. Cohen?
Yes.
Colson? Ms. Colson?
You're muted.
Sorry, I'm sorry. Yes.
Colson, yes, thank you. Mr. Floyd?
Yes.
Shriver?
Yes.
Penn?
Yes.
Stein?
Yes.
Approved.
Okay.
Great, thank you very much. We appreciate your time.
Thank
You're quite welcome.
Thank you.
Karen, could you circulate the wording of this to all the-
Absolutely, it'll be in the resolution and
Right.
you will,
Yeah.
you always
And-
get that ahead of time. So we
But I
will
mean,
certainly-
anybody else, like maybe the neighbors who were concerned, just so that it's clear? Is that possible?
Well,
Or no?
I think what might make more sense is that I will ask Claudia to post the resolution on the website so that anybody in the public can look at it in advance. And if they want to comment, then at our next meeting, they can.
That's a good idea.
That way everybody can see it. And if they see something that concerns them, and of course, we always provide it to the app, we will send it also to Mr. DeGrexy and he'll be able to look at it.
And Chris, can you let the Mercer Historic District people look at it when you get it?
Sure.
Okay,
Sure.
that'd be great.
I don't know if I have a way to, I guess I can give it to Pastor, I could give it to the Reverend and he could circulate it because I don't
Yeah.
have their.
Well, that's why I'd said if we just post it on the website, then it's easy for everybody to look at.
Yeah. If
So
they
we'll
know
be-
if they know to look for it.
And Karen, I'll give you what I put together, just if it's helpful, because I listed out a whole bunch of stuff and you can use it to, if it's helpful. Yeah.
That would be fine.
Great. All right. Thank you.
Okay.
Have a nice evening.
Is there any other thing? Anybody want to discuss anything else prior to adjournment?
When is our next meeting?
November
Next
4th.
Wednesday,
November
That's
4th,
what I thought. That's why I was afraid
November
of, yeah.
4 and then November 18.
a day that will live in infamy, November 4th, but that's another discussion. Okay. So I guess we're adjourned.
Motion to adjourn?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay.
So moved.
That's it.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good night.
Night.
Night.